My name is Molly, and I work as a public servant in a small town. 8 years ago, I married my husband, Michael, who is also a public servant. However, since our jobs require us to move frequently, we live apart. We don't have any children. Every evening at 9 p.m., I get a WhatsApp message from my husband. It usually says something like, "I have a meeting tonight, too." I reply, "You have a hard time every night. When will you be able to come home?" His response is always, "I don't know, unsure," and that's the end of our conversation. This has been the only kind of talk we've had in our 8 years of marriage. We've never lived together, so people might think ours is just a marriage of convenience, but in our line of work, this isn't unusual. We're both federal civil servants, specifically soldiers. We get transferred to different military bases every 2 to 3 years, and each time, our living situation changes. 2 years ago, during one of our WhatsApp chats, I asked, "Should I buy an apartment in Jackson, Mississippi, my hometown?" Michael replied, "That sounds great. I hope I get stationed in Jackson, too." "Of course you should, we are a couple, after all." I teased him, "Why are you denying it? Are we really a couple?" His reply was short, "Why are you saying such silly things? Still at work. See you tomorrow, bye." 2 years ago, I went ahead and bought the apartment in Jackson, where my parents live. I plan to live there even after I retire. If Michael ever gets stationed in Jackson, we plan to live together. One day, instead of a WhatsApp message, Michael called me, which was unusual. He said, "Hey, my parents are planning a trip from Eugene, Oregon, to Kentucky. When they pass through Mississippi, can they stay at your apartment?" I agreed and said, "Sure, Michael, it's been a while since I last saw them." He simply responded, "Thank you, bye." Even though the phone call was rare, Michael's response was cold. I realized I hadn't seen my in-laws since our wedding, which felt like ages ago. Since I'm based in Mississippi, Michael moves around the country, and his parents live in Eugene, Oregon. We hardly get a chance to meet. Excited to finally see my in-laws, I offered to show them around my hometown, Jackson. When they arrived, we exchanged greetings. "Molly, long time no see, how have you been?" they asked. I replied, "I'm doing well, thank you." Michael's parents apologized for not meeting up more often because Michael lives alone most of the time. I reassured them, saying, "Don't worry, we're like air to each other." That's exactly what it felt like. Michael and I were like air to each other, neither close nor distant. Since they were visiting Mississippi, I offered to take them to see the Windsor ruins, a famous site in the area. As we toured the ruins, they commented on how impressive they were, comparing them to the Shelton McMurphy Johnson house in Eugene. My father-in-law was comparing the Windsor ruins in Mississippi with the Shelton McMurphy Johnson house from their hometown, Eugene, Oregon. He admired both places and mentioned that parts of the house in Eugene had been damaged in an earthquake 6 years ago, and the unrepaired sections had to be demolished. "That's a shame," I replied. Then I suggested, "Next, let's visit the petrified forest." I spent the whole day showing my in-laws around the attractions of Mississippi. My mother-in-law really liked the city and even started talking about living there. She said, "I've fallen in love with Mississippi." "Thank you, Molly. Would it be okay if I stayed here for a while?" I said, "Of course. I'm usually not home during the day, so I'll give you a spare key." I handed her the key, thinking they'd stay for 4 or 5 days, but a week passed, and they showed no signs of leaving. Eventually, I made them an offer. "If you love it here so much, I could lease the apartment to you for $600 a month. I can stay at my parents' house in the meantime." To my surprise, my father-in-law got really angry. "What on earth are you thinking? Asking family to pay rent? You should let us stay for free." My mother-in-law quickly stepped in to calm him down, but the situation still made me feel uneasy. So, I suggested, "How about this? You just cover the cost of utilities, electricity, water, and gas." One day during their second week at my place, I got a phone call while I was at work. It was the property manager, Brian. He told me, "We got a call from the downstairs neighbors. They said there's a water leak coming from your apartment, and it's staining their ceiling. Can you come over right away? We can't go inside without your permission." I couldn't leave work immediately, but I managed to return to the apartment during my lunch break. When I walked in with the property manager, my mother-in-law looked surprised. "Oh, Molly, what brings you here? What about work?" I explained. "The people downstairs said there might be a water leak from this apartment." She seemed clueless and replied, "A water leak? I don't know anything about that." Whether she truly didn't know or was pretending, I wasn't sure, so I walked past her to check near the washing machine. The washing machine was spinning, but the hose had come loose, causing a mess. This is the problem, I thought. I went downstairs with the property manager, and we were allowed to check the ceiling. Sure enough, there was a large stain spreading from where the washing machine was located. I sighed in frustration. My mother-in-law came to see the damage, looking guilty, and quickly went back upstairs. I had to apologize to the neighbors downstairs, bringing them a box of cookies, and I also got billed for the repair costs by the property management. When I told my mother-in-law, she lashed out, saying, "So, you're telling us to leave, huh? We're not going anywhere that easily. Should we just pack up and go?" The complaints didn't stop there. Soon after, the property manager called again with another issue. I braced myself. This time, the complaint was about my father-in-law singing loudly on the balcony at night, disturbing the neighbors. Frustrated, I went to the apartment, only to find my in-laws were gone. They left a note saying, "Thanks for your hospitality, we're heading back to Seattle." I couldn't believe it. They had left without paying for any of the utilities they used, and they left behind a ton of garbage. "At least take out your trash," I muttered to myself. With them gone, I moved back into my apartment from my parents' house. One day, my husband called unexpectedly. He said, "My parents love your apartment, so I'm giving it to them as a gift. Understand? If you don't agree, we're getting a divorce." In the background, I could hear my mother-in-law laughing. After leaving my apartment, my in-laws had moved into their son's government housing. Instead of talking to me directly, they had manipulated my husband into demanding that I give up my apartment. Now, I was forced to make a choice. I either give up the apartment I worked so hard for or get a divorce. I thought long and hard, feeling torn. Finally, I made up my mind. 2 days later, my husband called, but instead of texting me through WhatsApp, he said angrily, "You'll pay for this." That same day, when he gave me the ultimatum to choose between the apartment or a divorce, I sent him the divorce papers by express mail. He was furious, as he didn't expect me to act so decisively. Not even a week later, my boss called me into the office. To my shock, I received a transfer order to Dallas. It turned out that my ex-husband, who handled personnel, had pulled some strings to harass me because I refused to give up my apartment. I won't forget this, I thought. But what about my apartment? Should I give in and rent it to my ex's parents? I wasn't sure what to do, so I went to see the legal affairs officer at my workplace. The officer told me, "You have no connection to your ex-husband anymore, so you're not related to his parents either. I think you should rent it out as a landlord." That's exactly what I was thinking. I immediately called my in-laws, who had returned to Portland, and told them that I was ready to rent my apartment out. When I was transferred to Dallas, my in-laws surprisingly agreed to rent the apartment without any hassle. It turned out it wasn't harassment, they just really liked the place. I set a rent of $700 a month, including utility bills and the cost of the repairs from before, and they accepted it without any fuss. While working in Dallas, I was also studying for a highly competitive internal selection exam. Only a few senior military officers get to the top level, and the biggest challenge was passing the exam to enter the command staff course. This course trains future unit commanders, and those who complete it are assigned to lead units all over the country. It wasn't so much about wanting power or control, I was driven by the desire to outrank my ex-husband and prove myself. To my delight, I passed the tough exam on the first try and was admitted to the command staff course. Watch this, Michael, I thought. The real revenge starts now. The course was held at the military officer school in New York, where my ex-husband lived. Even though he handled personnel matters, and probably knew I had passed, I didn't reach out to him, and he didn't contact me either. 16 months later, I completed the course and became a unit commander in charge of training soldiers in Nebraska. Coincidentally, my ex-husband was also assigned to Nebraska, where he worked at the Regional Cooperation Headquarters, handling military and local community relations. Thanks to the internal exam, I now outranked him. One day, during a training session for newly arrived senior officers in Nebraska, my ex-husband saw me and came straight over. The first thing he said was, "Why are you wearing a rank insignia that's higher than mine?" His outburst caught everyone by surprise, including the higher-ups around us. I calmly brushed it off, feeling satisfied inside. I thought to myself, I'm no longer stuck with someone like you. It was a beautiful, sunny Sunday, the day of the annual base open day. This event gave regular citizens a rare chance to interact with military personnel. The atmosphere was lively, with children and adults cheering as they admired the tanks on display. The combat training simulation, where where soldiers descended from a helicopter in a dramatic, Spider-Man-like fashion, left everyone amazed. People were taking photos with soldiers in camouflage, and many were excited to grab commemorative merchandise. As a training coordinator, I was stationed at a booth where citizens could try out the forward-leaning rest position alongside active servicemen. That's when my ex-husband appeared, bringing some members of the Parents Association. Seeing him made all my pent-up feelings of revenge toward him and my former in-laws flare up. It felt like the perfect moment to act. This is my chance for revenge. Without thinking, I called out to him and his parents, inviting them over to the booth. Reluctantly, my ex-husband joined in. I handed him an iron helmet and lined him up with the other servicemen. "All right," I announced. "In the military, we give everyone a number instead of calling them by name. I'm going to start the numbering. The person on the right says 1, then the next person says 2, and so on." I placed my ex-husband in the number 1 spot, lining him up with a mix of servicemen and regular citizens. "Numbering, start," I called out. 1, he said slowly. "You're too slow. When I say start, you respond right away," I snapped. Watching my ex-husband stand at attention like a soldier made me want to laugh. This is hilarious. Next, we moved on to practice the forward-leaning rest position. The instructor, a serviceman, explained the procedure. After the participants practiced several times and got the hang of it, I took over. "Now we're going to simulate combat training," I announced. "Soldiers, be mindful of where you're pointing your muzzles. For those without guns, just pretend." I gave orders to the 9 participants. "Target the tree ahead, move forward, but stay low, using the tree as cover. Keep your guns pointed toward the enemy, and move in teams using a bounding overwatch technique." Then I gave the command, "Number 1, bounding overwatch, move forward." I decided to push my ex-husband to his limits with my orders. "What are you doing? Number 1, you're too slow, move forward," I yelled. My ex-husband, though reluctant, followed my commands. "Number 1, you're standing too tall, you're going to get shot. Do you want to die, Number 1? I kept pushing him as he crawled around the ground with his rifle, looking completely defeated. Under the hot sun, he barely managed to say, "Number 1. Your voice is too quiet, say it again," I ordered. Suddenly, laughter erupted from the crowd. The spectators, who didn't know we were ex-spouses, thought it was funny to see a female commander bossing around a male soldier. However, my ex-husband's parents watched with grim faces. In the military world, rank is everything. My ex-husband had always used his higher rank to try and dominate me, both at work and in our personal life. There's even a saying that there's a rank system among military wives. His parents, who had always looked down on me, loved the attention he got, even though it was more because of his rank than his character. Fueled by frustration, I took the selection exam and passed it on the first try, completely flipping the situation. It felt amazing to show my ex-husband and his parents who was really in charge, especially in front of them, as they had always thought their son was so important. The way I berated him had a huge impact on them. A few days later, my ex-in-laws called to say they were moving out of the apartment. This meant I could finally stop commuting from my parents' house and move back into my own place. Ironically, I still run into my ex-husband here and there. Seeing the grimace on his face each time has become a secret little pleasure of mine.
After my father's funeral, my brother-in-law abruptly joined the conversation about inheritance. He announced that the stocks and $5 million inheritance would go to my wife, the eldest daughter. This surprised my sister and brother-in-law, who were eager for the money. However, the lawyer then told us that my sister Kelly had no right to the inheritance. Let me explain a bit about myself. I'm John Watson, a 42-year-old sales worker with a wife and 2 kids. My father was a major shareholder in a company and still worked actively at 78. I have an older sister named Kelly who's significantly older than me. She's always been a troublemaker for our parents due to her bad behavior. Kelly, now in her middle age, doesn't hold a stable job and lives freely. I've never been close to my sister, especially because of her behavior. At 50, she suddenly brought home a man named Chris Adams, much younger than her but didn't leave a good impression due to his laziness and rude behavior. Kelly shamelessly demanded money from our father for their wedding and spent it quickly, asking for more. Sadly, not long after their marriage, our father collapsed while playing golf and passed away a few days later. This was devastating news for us. I was deeply saddened, along with our family and friends. After the funeral, while my mother and I were finally able to rest, a lawyer visited us to discuss the inheritance. It turned out that my father had left a will, and my mother and I were informed about it beforehand. However, my sister and her smiling brother-in-law, unaware of the situation, barged into the inheritance discussion and made a shocking claim. The stocks and $5 million inheritance would go to my wife, the eldest daughter. They asked us not to act arbitrarily. My mother and I were left speechless by this sudden announcement. "We did it, Kelly. Now I can be rich too instead of mourning our father," my brother-in-law exclaimed joyfully. The lawyer, clearly surprised, responded firmly, "Kelly, you don't have any inheritance rights." My sister and her husband were taken aback. "What are you talking about? That's impossible, right? Kelly is the eldest daughter of this family," they protested confidently. It seemed my brother-in-law was banking on this inheritance, thinking my sister would receive it. However, the lawyer, looking serious, quietly informed them, "Didn't you know? Kelly is not the biological child of the late Mrs. Watson." Suddenly, my sister's expression changed as she turned to look at our mother. "Mom?" she asked, her face filled with a mix of shock and confusion. Our mother had an indescribable expression on her face. I knew that my sister was a half-sibling, but it seemed she was unaware. In a near frenzy, my sister started shaking our mother's shoulders, pleading, "Mom, what does this mean? Kelly, you are the child of my previous husband." That was all our mother managed to mutter in response. My sister, who had teased me since childhood with comments like, "Daddy thinks I'm cuter," now wore an incredulous expression. But as she was legally adopted, she should have inheritance rights. My brother-in-law suddenly exclaimed, "Right, Kelly? Yes, that's right," he added confidently. However, our mother shook her head. "There was no legal adoption," she explained. My sister and her husband looked shocked. "Again, that's impossible. I am the eldest daughter, even Dad said so." My sister shouted angrily, glaring at me. "I won't let you monopolize the inheritance," she declared. I was irritated by her attitude and retorted, "After all the money Dad spent on you? You still say that? Shut up. I'm his daughter too. I have every right." My brother-in-law chimed in, "Right. What's wrong with spending money on a daughter?" I sighed involuntarily. Normal expenditures for a daughter would have been fine, but my sister had used our father's money to pay off debts and settle troubles. At this point, John, the lawyer who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Why don't we show Kelly the will too?" he suggested. "The will? I don't know anything about that," my sister panicked. Her ignorance, however, was her own fault. Our father had wanted to discuss the will's contents with us and had asked us to be present during its making. However, my sister scoffed and went out to play instead of taking the matter seriously. When I pointed this out, my brother-in-law glared at her fiercely, questioning her actions. Faced with this confrontation, they finally agreed to hear what the lawyer had to say. The lawyer then revealed my father's will, which clearly stated that the inheritance was to be left to me and my mother. It also explained why my father chose not to adopt my sister. Initially, he had intended to, but he became disappointed with her behavior towards me, her half-brother, and her reckless spending as she grew older. Understanding that she had no inheritance rights, my sister was stunned. "Damn it! What are you going to do now?" My brother-in-law suddenly raised his voice. "You deceived me. You said you had money." His demeanor turned rough, surprising both my mother and sister, though I wasn't shocked. My brother-in-law had often shown his gold-digging tendencies. Perhaps he even married my sister under false pretenses. "Kelly, don't come back until you get some money." "Wait, Chris, what do you mean by that?" My sister protested in confusion. "I thought I was going to be rich. What a disappointment." Roughly pushing my sister aside, my brother-in-law quietly left the room. Left behind, my sister glared at us with a red face and exclaimed, "Mom, why didn't you arrange for me to be adopted? It's unfair that only you get the inheritance. I should have received something too. but you didn't handle it properly." In front of our flustered mother, my sister cried out, "It's unfair. It's terrible," while sobbing and messing up her hair. I was taken aback by her terrifying appearance, but the lawyer seemed unfazed, perhaps used to such scenes. "Why does only he get it?" "Because I'm Dad's son," I explained calmly. Hearing this, my sister's eyes widened in anger, and she lunged at me, shouting, "It would have been better if you never existed." Reflecting quietly to myself, I realized that even if I hadn't been born, my father would likely have made the same decision given the kind of person my sister is. Before I could say anything, the lawyer gently intervened, warning my sister that her actions could become a police matter. My sister flinched, perhaps affected by the mention of the police due to her past involvement in shoplifting incidents. When our mother called out to her with tears in her eyes, my sister clicked her tongue in annoyance and left the room. Half a year has passed since then, and the inheritance procedures were completed smoothly without any issues. My sister and brother-in-law grumbled for a while, but thanks to the lawyer's efficient handling, they had no opportunity to interfere. My mother gave my sister some money, but I don't feel it's my place to comment on that. What really upset me was that my sister and her husband disappeared with the money. Their blatant greed disgusted our relatives who were aware of the situation. Then one day, I went out to eat with my mother, wife, and daughter. Upon my wife's suggestion, my mother, who had been somewhat withdrawn since my father's passing, seemed brighter in the company of her adorable granddaughter. "Hey, Mom, why don't you move in with us?" I suggested. "But you know Kelly might come by sometimes." "Sis only comes to beg for money, right?" "Don't be too lenient with her," my wife added. My mother hesitated understandably, considering that my sister is her biological daughter. Also, if our family moved into the family home, my sister might cause trouble again. Understanding her concerns, I simply asked her to consider it and drove towards the family home to drop her off. When we arrived at the supposedly empty house, we noticed lights were on. It wasn't the time for the housekeeper to be there, so we suspected my sister might have returned. With that thought, I parked the car in the garage. "We should stop by for a cup of coffee," I suggested as we got out of the car and started walking towards the entrance. Suddenly, a car drove dangerously towards us. Hearing my daughter's voice, I instinctively shielded my wife. Ouch! Fortunately, the car only grazed me, throwing me against a nearby flower bed. My body took the impact hard, but the car stopped after hitting the garage entrance. "Are you okay, dear?" My wife and daughter rushed over to help me up, while my mother stood trembling at the entrance, understandably shocked. Chaos ensued, and I was taken to the hospital by ambulance, where I had to stay for a day. Later, I learned that the driver was Chris Adams, my brother-in-law. He apparently told the police that he mistook the accelerator for the brake, but I doubted his story. When my mother and sister came to visit me in the hospital, my sister coldly looked at me and said disappointedly, "You're surprisingly tough, aren't you?" I thought to myself, just as I suspected. If I had been seriously injured in the accident, my mother would have inherited everything. "My bad luck for you," my sister smirked. "Mom said she would renounce her inheritance from me, so doing such a thing is just a waste of time." My sister seemed surprised to hear this and couldn't comprehend why someone would refuse an inheritance. "I have a wife and kids, so she asked me to pass it on to them." "That's what parents do," I explained. "But I even made a will early on, following Dad's example." My sister's mouth fell open upon hearing this. "So then, unfortunately, my share won't go to Mom anymore," I added firmly. My sister trembled and shook as she looked at me. "Give me at least a little. There's $5 million, right?" When I flatly refused, my sister's face twisted into a demonic expression, and she grabbed my collar. "Give me half. I'm your sister," she screamed in an unusual voice, possibly driven mad by her desire for the inheritance. "Don't you understand that your greediness disappointed Dad?" I calmly responded. My sister's face turned red with rage, and she grabbed at my throat. "Kelly, what are you doing?" My mother returned and raised her voice. Nurses called by the nurse call system then escorted my sister out. My mother seemed to want to defend my sister. It was painful to watch my mother express her sadness, questioning where she went wrong in raising my sister, as my sister hurled insults at her. Soon after, my mother was found to have an illness. As she grew weaker, my wife and I started helping out with transportation and household chores at the family home. Apparently, this offended my sister. She probably ran into my wife when she came to ask for money or heard about it from my mother. One day, my sister called my phone and abruptly said, "From now on, we'll take care of Mom. You guys don't need to come." I was caught off guard and tried to reason with her, but my sister didn't listen and hung up, claiming it was already decided. I confirmed with my wife, and she had been told the same thing and was brushed away. Worried that my sister, who had never cared for a sick person or done household chores, could handle this responsibility, I hastily contacted my mother. Surprisingly, it turned out that my brother-in-law had some experience in caregiving, and my mother was still independent enough, so it seemed there wouldn't be a problem for now. I felt somewhat relieved. However, within a month, my mother was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance due to a mistake with her medication dosage. When our family hurried to the hospital, my mother looked alarmingly frail. The doctor was puzzled because she had never made such a mistake before. Leaving my wife to accompany her, I went to the family home, which was in disarray. The fridge was empty despite my mom's love for cooking, and apparently, the helper service had been unilaterally canceled. I felt ashamed for even slightly trusting my sister and was infuriated. A significant amount of money had been withdrawn from my mother's bank account, though the bank card and PIN were safe. Fortunately, the account containing the inheritance was safe in a safe deposit box, but almost all the money set aside for living expenses was gone. I gathered the necessary items for my mother's hospital stay along with her bank card and returned to explain the situation to her. My mother seemed unaware of the bank card situation, but when I asked about the medication mistake, she looked gloomy and said it was prepared by my brother-in-law. "Mom, it's better not to let my sister into that house anymore," I suggested. "John, I said I would take care of you, but the house is in terrible condition, and you've lost so much weight. Haven't you been fed properly?" my mother asked, looking downhearted. "Mom, you should live with us after all. I'll build a house where we can live together," I said, and as I spoke, my mother burst into tears. However, her health worsened. After my mother's passing, I returned to the family home to prepare for the funeral and discovered that all the valuables were missing. It seemed my sister and brother-in-law had taken them in their desperation for money. Standing in the empty house, I was stunned and filled with intense anger, vowing to make them pay for their actions. The day after my mother's funeral, my sister and I were supposed to meet with the lawyer, presumably to discuss the inheritance. My sister boldly declared that the inheritance from Mom belonged to her daughter. I couldn't help but burst into laughter at her statement, as she seemed to be misunderstanding something. When the lawyer revealed the will, my sister's face lost all color. "No, why?" she explained. "Kelly is not to inherit anything. That was Mom's last wish," the lawyer explained. My brother-in-law lashed out in disbelief, but the lawyer repeated the same statement. "That's ridiculous. Kelly is that old woman's child," my brother-in-law shouted, sweeping things off the table in anger. "You can't fool us. Hand over the inheritance now." "Chris, you tried to harm my mom, didn't you?" I accused my brother-in-law. Irritated, he denied any wrongdoing, dismissing the medication mistake. "Why did you make a mistake with her medication then?" I pressed. My brother-in-law scoffed. "Who cares about that, John? It's crazy that I don't get any inheritance." "What did you do? My sister is going insane again. I can't even pay for my apartment now," my sister cried out, revealing her reliance on the inheritance for her expenses. I was shocked by her callousness. Instead of rushing over after hearing of our mother's death, she was counting on the inheritance for her financial stability. "Tell me it's not true. I get nothing," my sister confronted the lawyer. The lawyer carefully explained the compulsory portion of the inheritance and concluded that after deducting the amount my sister had withdrawn and the items she sold, it almost amounted to zero. My sister scratched her head in frustration. That can't be true. It can't be so little, my sister muttered to herself. Unbeknownst to my sister and me, the majority of my mother's estate had already been gifted to my daughters, her grandchildren, during her lifetime. That's why the amount available for inheritance was so small. My sister seemed dissatisfied. Mom was happy thinking you'd take care of her, but you just took her money and left. You ungrateful wretch. I couldn't help but shout in anger. Giving costs money, you know, my sister retorted defensively. Then show me the detailed expenses you used for Mom's living costs. I'll cover the necessary expenses, I challenged, holding out my hand. I don't have anything like that, my sister stammered, her face turning pale. That won't do. Without receipts, it can't be recognized, the lawyer pressed. Caught off guard by my immediate response, my brother-in-law was momentarily speechless. Despite his persistence, I refused to help my sister. If things had gone smoothly at that time, Kelly would have had the entire inheritance, my brother-in-law grumbled, inadvertently revealing his intentions. What do you mean by that time? I questioned, but before I could get an answer, my brother-in-law accidentally spilled the beans, complaining about his car troubles. That's quite a statement. It sounds like fraud, the lawyer smiled, holding a recorder. Realizing his mistake, my brother-in-law turned pale. I informed him that I would be pressing charges about the accident. Don't be ridiculous. There's no evidence, my brother-in-law protested. You just provided the evidence yourself, I pointed out. My sister began to cry and shake my brother-in-law in frustration, realizing the gravity of their situation. Eventually, my brother-in-law faced criminal charges, and it seemed his past misdemeanors also came to light. My sister, as an accomplice, faced a lesser sentence. Unable to pay for her apartment, my sister went to relatives to beg for money but was turned down by everyone. As for me, I continued to work hard without relying on inheritance, finding small pleasures in looking forward to stock dividends. I was in the middle of buying a house and getting ready to move when suddenly my mother-in-law showed up with a crazy idea. She wanted to live with us. She'd always treated me badly, making me work like crazy whenever I visited their house. My father-in-law didn't do anything to stop her. It seemed like she wanted to move in with us just to make me work for her. Determined to stop this, I told them a surprising fact. I'm single. They were shocked, but they kept saying mean things about me. Someone who was watching got really angry. Let me introduce myself. I'm Jessica, 33 years old, and I work in a big company. My husband works there too, and we've been married for 2 years. We met at a company party, and he pursued me until I said yes. We had a good relationship, but there was one problem: his parents. Before we got married, his parents seemed nice, but things changed after the wedding. They wanted to live with us, and I was not okay with that. But it turned out they were the opposite of nice. One day, my husband and I were relaxing at home when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. My husband went to answer it, and to my surprise, it was my in-laws. They barged in without a word, taking over the living room as if they owned the place. They had a habit of making snide remarks towards me, acting entitled and disrespectful. My husband rarely stood up for me because he felt obligated to honor his parents as their only child. Despite my complaints about their behavior, he seldom intervened. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law would constantly demand things like tea in a loud and indirect way. During their unexpected visit, I had to cater to them, preparing tea and lunch, ruining our day off. This wasn't the first time they had intruded on our plans. They even had the audacity to invite us to a tea party at their place, knowing I'd be expected to do all the work. But if I didn't go, I knew she'd gossip about me later. So reluctantly, I decided to attend her tea party. I wished my husband would stand up for us, but I knew it wouldn't work. On the day of the party, we were expected to arrive early. My mother-in-law scolded us for being late, even though it wasn't entirely our fault. Then she put me to work right away, while she relaxed and watched TV. I ended up preparing all the snacks for the party, which took a long time because she demanded so much. She criticized me for being slow, even though she never made snacks herself. I finished them relatively quickly, but she never thanked me. I realized she purposely asked for more to hassle me. While my husband and father-in-law set up for the party, they didn't help with the cooking. Throughout the preparations, she made snide remarks, but I tried to ignore them. During the party, she took credit for the snacks whenever guests complimented them. It was a painful experience for me, but I'm glad you liked them. Even though she didn't help at all, she took credit for my work. Furthermore, when the discussion turned to daughters-in-law, she made up stories, saying things like, "My daughter-in-law treats me like a slave." It was very uncomfortable for me. After the tea party ended, I had to clean up everything, and she even asked me to clean the room. I felt like a maid, holding back tears. I thought to myself, I'm never coming here if she calls me again. But life wasn't that easy. The tea party seemed to be a big hit and became a regular event, especially since many said they loved the snacks. "Jessica, there's another tea party next weekend. Please come." "But I have work that day." "You can take a day off, right?" "Are you trying to embarrass me? If you don't come, I'll make sure you get divorced." She called me unexpectedly and insisted I come. Even when I said I had work, she showed no mercy. I didn't have the courage to oppose her and felt threatened by the possibility of divorce, so I always obliged, taking days off from work. As a result, I ended up working tirelessly for these tea parties and taking frequent leaves from work, which made things uncomfortable at my workplace. Whenever I discussed this with my husband, he just said, "Come on, she doesn't mean any harm. Just let it go." He never really helped. Before I knew it, I found myself constantly pondering how to break free from this miserable life. The answer I came up with was to get a divorce. It meant separating from my husband David. Honestly, I grappled a lot with the decision. Even though I felt betrayed by David not helping me, a part of me still loved him. I didn't want to continue a life tormented primarily by my mother-in-law. By divorcing David, we would essentially become strangers, eliminating the need to interact with my in-laws. The only remaining issue was whether David would agree to the divorce. "I don't want a divorce," David said, surprised by my sudden suggestion. "I can't stand dealing with your mom anymore. You know what our relationship with her is like, right?" "I get it, but that doesn't mean we have to divorce. I love you, Jessica, and I want to be with you forever." "I feel the same, but I can't bear it any longer. How about we get a divorce on paper, live separately, but still stay in touch and maintain our relationship? What do you think?" Hesitantly, David agreed. And so, due to the malicious actions of my mother-in-law, we ended up getting a divorce. Life post-divorce was truly peaceful. Having submitted our divorce papers gave me the push to change my cell phone model and number, which stopped the incessant calls from my mother-in-law. David continued to live in our previous apartment while I rented a new one, ensuring unexpected visits from my in-laws ceased. Life without interacting with my in-laws was great, but something was missing: the married life with David. Even after the divorce, our mutual affection meant neither of us was satisfied living apart. Then an idea struck me. It was a risky plan, but I decided to give it a shot. As a first step, I immersed myself in my work more than ever before. After explaining my situation to my colleagues post-divorce, I regained their trust by dedicating myself fully to work. Eventually, I achieved savings of $500,000. Since college, I had enjoyed saving money, dreaming of buying my own home someday. Having finally saved up $500,000, I felt confident about buying a decent home. I quickly reached out to David to discuss buying our dream house. "A house? It's gonna cost a lot." "How are you going to handle that?" David asked. "Don't worry about it. I've saved up. How about we visit some show houses on our next day off?" I suggested. And so, we planned a day to visit show homes. David, amazed by my savings, expressed his gratitude, making me feel my efforts had paid off. "By the way, let's not tell your parents about the house just yet. We'll inform them when the time is right, David suggested. Got it. Knowing them, they might make things complicated, I agreed. Reaffirming our wish to get back together, we steadily made preparations for our dream home. After some time, we visited various model houses, discussing preferences like where to have an outlet, kitchen layout, and a view of the living room. Considering future children, we kept their needs in mind. Finally, the blueprint was completed and construction began. Discussing the budget with the contractor, we made sure it stayed within $500,000. David mused as we admired the location of our new house. I'm excited. Speaking of which, have you made up your mind about our plan? For us to live happily in our new home, it was crucial to ensure there'd be no interference from David's parents. David needed to either convince them to keep their distance or cut ties altogether. I'm sorry, I just can't make up my mind yet, David admitted. You know, I'm an only child. Of course, I understand all the terrible things Mom did, but I owe her for raising me. And I'm worried about what'll happen to her if I'm not around. I couldn't forgive my in-laws, but I did understand how David felt. Well, it's up to you, David, I replied. I bought the house under my name, and since we're divorced, you don't have to force yourself to come here. I let him know. Now it was up to David to decide. We parted ways that day. I had some time before the new house was ready, so I got back to work and slowly prepared for the move. Regardless of David's choice, I was ready to give his parents a hard time. Either way, my plans seemed to be working out. After getting home from work one day, I continued my moving preparations. Then my phone buzzed, indicating a new message. It was from David. Good job. Seeing the message from David, I smirked. Things were looking like they'd head towards the best possible future. After a while, my dream house was completed. It turned out great, just the way I wanted it. Seeing the finished home made me realize the magnitude of this purchase. But just because the house was ready doesn't mean I was content. The real challenge was about to begin. Since I had been preparing to move even before the house was ready, the movers smoothly transported all my stuff to the new place. After the move, I went to the apartment where I used to live and where David now lived alone. I sat at the dining table in the living room and soon heard a flurry of noises from the entrance. The moment had come. David brought his parents. It's been a while. Haven't you invited us over? His mother complained as they headed towards the living room. As soon as they saw me, his mother exclaimed, Jessica, we heard you were on a long business trip, but you're here. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Sorry about that. I just got back yesterday and was too busy to reach out, I lied. Well, all right. But you bought a house, right, and spent a lot of money? It's pretty spacious. Maybe we should live with you, his mother suggested. Indeed, living with you too would be more comforting, his father chimed in. You bought the house for us, right? I had to bite my tongue to not laugh out loud at his father's remark. David silently observed the situation. Please take a seat. We need to discuss this, I said as I served them tea. I thought, this is the last time I'll entertain them. Now about that new house, my mother-in-law began. Exactly, you bought it for us, right? I'm looking forward to living with you too. But I'm single, you know, I replied. I hadn't told the in-laws that we divorced. To dodge my mother-in-law's unreasonable demands, I had lied about going on a long business trip. Single. What do you mean? Aren't you married to David? What nonsense is this? Are you making fun of us? They exclaimed upon hearing the truth. They were furious. Exactly as I said. David and I are divorced, so I'm single. The house is under my name, so you can't live there. I decide who lives in my house. We never heard about any divorce, and the sudden business trip seemed fishy. Thanks to you, I've been made a fool of. Watch your actions, young lady, and take responsibility, they scolded. So, you betrayed not just us, but David too? Divorcing was the right decision, they continued. When I firmly stated that I couldn't live there, my in-laws bombarded me with sarcastic remarks and complaints. Hearing this, my husband David finally lost his temper. Enough. "Stop badgering Jessica. Back off." He intervened, shocking his parents into silence. Apparently, they weren't expecting such an outburst from their own son. "The reason we were heading for a divorce in the first place was because of you two," David added firmly. "That's a cruel thing to say," David responded. "I was only thinking of Jessica. After constantly belittling her and forcing her to attend those ridiculous tea parties where she was treated like a servant, making her miserable. How is that thinking of Jessica? She's not your convenient maid. She's my cherished wife. And because of you two, our life together is a mess. Stay out of our relationship." On the day we were packing for the move, I received a message from David. "I'm really sorry for everything. I've decided to cut ties with my parents." I had thought that he didn't truly love me because he never helped out before. Hearing David's true feelings, I'd almost burst into tears. I was their only child, so I thought they'd be lost without me. I owed them for raising me, so I never said anything. But I've reached my limit. I'm cutting ties. Don't come near Jessica and me ever again. "Is that how you talk to your parents?" his mother protested. "People who hurt my beloved wife don't have the right to call themselves parents," David replied firmly. "Don't say that. I'll try to improve my relationship with Jessica," his mother pleaded. I didn't trust my mother-in-law's words at all. After hearing what David said, she still insisted on improving our relationship. "Do you want to hear this?" I asked, opening a voice memo on my phone and playing a recording. It was a collection of the snide remarks my mother-in-law had made to me, with a few from my father-in-law. Their faces went pale as they listened. "If you try to approach us again, I'll take this to a lawyer. That's how it is, so please leave. And by the way, we've already canceled the lease on this apartment, so showing up unannounced won't do any good," David declared, ushering his parents out. And they left dejectedly. That marked the end of our long struggle with my overbearing in-laws. Afterwards, David prepared for our move to our new home. Rumor has it that word got out in their community, and they became the talk of the town. I wondered who could have leaked it, only to find out David had told some close friends about the situation to ensure his parents wouldn't overstep their bounds again. I hadn't thought of that, so I almost gave David a standing ovation. For my part, David and I reconciled, resubmitted our marriage license, and were happily back together. The strategy one had in mind worked perfectly. Now we're comfortably settling into our dream home. It was quite an investment, and given the uncertain circumstances when we bought it, I was nervous. But living here happily with David, I feel it was worth every penny. And then, to our surprise, I was pregnant. Our future as a family of 3 in this house isn't far away. Though challenges lie ahead, we want to be good parents to our child, learning from the mistakes of David's parents. After my father's funeral, my mother wasted no time before launching into her plans. "I'm going to take all of Dad's $184,000 inheritance now that caregiving is over. You're useless to me, haha. Please leave right now," she said, her words cutting sharply. I couldn't believe she'd say something so callous right after the funeral. She seemed utterly hopeless. But I had already prepared for this moment long before my father's passing. With a confident smile, I replied, "Thank you. I've been waiting for this. My name is Susan, and I'm 28 years old, still living in my parents' house. My father was the light in my life, always there for me despite his busy schedule. He ran a company but always made time for family dinners and my school events. Its kindness meant the world to me. My mother, on the other hand, was a different story. She never showed much affection, especially when I was young. Living with my paternal grandparents under the same roof didn't make things easier. My mother often vented her frustrations when my father or grandparents weren't around, directing her anger towards me. My grandmother, though kind on the surface, had her moments of cruelty, especially towards my mother. She would often make hurtful remarks, reflecting disappointment in not having a boy to carry on the family legacy. Despite my efforts to win my mother's approval through academic success and even winning swimming competitions, her criticism only grew worse. She'd remark about my looks, comparing me unfavorably to my father, whom she adored. My mother's beauty and past as a model seemed incongruous with her behavior. Marrying my father for his wealth didn't bring her the life of luxury she expected, especially with my grandparents in the picture. Things worsened after my grandparents passed away, leaving my mother unchecked. She squandered my father's money on parties, neglecting both me and the household chores. Meanwhile, my father was focused on rebuilding his company's stock value, leaving me feeling isolated and lonely. But despite it all, I had learned to navigate the deceitful world of adults like my mother from a young age. Now, with my father gone, I was prepared to stand up for myself and claim what was rightfully mine. But despite my resolve, I couldn't bring myself to confront my father about my mother's behavior. I understood how hard he was working and felt that saying more would only burden him further. My aspirations remained clear. I aimed to attend a prestigious university and eventually join and support my father's company. In my dreams, I even envisioned taking over the business someday. I had no desire to live off someone else's efforts like my mother, content with a life of ease without any personal contribution. So I dedicated myself to hard work, steadily advancing towards my goals. As my father's business stabilized, he was thrilled to hear about my ambitions to join him. He allowed me to intern at his company during my third year of university. The employees were patient and kind, teaching me the intricacies of the business. After graduation, I officially joined the company as a full-time employee. Meanwhile, my relationship with my mother remained distant. I found solace in my work, immersing myself in the challenges of the corporate world. Despite being more strict and commanding in the office, my father always showed me kindness and concern, switching effortlessly between the roles of boss and father. As the years passed, I continued to thrive in my role within the company. However, life took a sudden turn when my father suffered a severe leg injury in an accident. He required extensive caregiving, and I couldn't trust anyone but myself to provide it. Reluctantly, I returned home to care for him, setting aside my feelings towards my mother for the sake of my father's well-being. Despite my mother's hurtful words, I chose to brush them off. My focus remained on caring for my father while juggling responsibilities at the company. Even confined to a wheelchair, my father's mind remained sharp, and he continued to lead the company, giving instructions remotely and attending meetings only when absolutely necessary. During this time, my father expressed his gratitude and apologized for the trouble I was going through. "It's fine, Dad," I reassured him. "I still have so much to learn from you." As I cared for him, my father imparted invaluable lessons in management, seemingly aware of his declining health. When we eventually learned he had cancer with only a year left to live, I was devastated. Spending even more time with him became my priority, visiting him daily when he was hospitalized. As his condition worsened, my father made a heartfelt request to entrust the company to me. "I've taught you a lot, Susan," he said. "I trust you with the company. I'm counting on you for everything after I'm gone." I promised to fulfill his wish to protect both him and the legacy of the company. A week later, he passed away, surrounded by loved ones and company employees who had become like family. Notably absent was my mother, who hadn't visited him once during his illness. Her indifference appalled me, but I chose not to confront her at the funeral, knowing it would be futile. In the midst of my grief, one thought lingered. I would uphold my promise to my father, to safeguard the company he had worked so hard to build. And if my mother dared to shed crocodile tears, I wouldn't hesitate to put her in her place. Despite my mother's unchanged demeanor, she boldly pretended to mourn in front of my father's friends. It was evident, however, that her true feelings were far from sorrow. She was likely pleased by his demise. The allure of my father's substantial inheritance seemed to be her sole source of satisfaction in the wake of his passing. Immediately after the funeral, she wasted no time in approaching me with her demands. "I'm going to take all of Dad's $1,984,000 inheritance now that caregiving is over. You're useless to me, haha. Please leave right now," she declared. I couldn't believe she would be so brazen as to demand this immediately after the funeral. But I was already prepared for her audaciousness. With a smile plastered on my face, I calmly responded, "Thank you. I've been waiting for this." Her surprise was evident, but I remained unfazed as I packed only the essentials, ready to move out. "I'm going to sell all my stuff," I informed her. "You can do whatever you want with this house and the $1,984,000 inheritance. I don't need anything else. I'll live and enjoy life to the fullest." Her mocking laughter only fueled my determination as I ignored her and left soon after. A month later, she bombarded me with calls, questioning why I had left the house. Reluctantly, I answered, "What do you mean by this? Why do I have to leave the house?" she demanded. I couldn't resist teasing her a little. "Oh, that's because I inherited the house," I replied casually. "Dad left the house to me, not you. I sold it for about $1 billion. Her disbelief was palpable. "$1 billion? It's sold for that much," she exclaimed. But her shock didn't sway me. "Well, it doesn't matter," I assured her. "I have $1,984,000 inheritance." With that, I ended the call, content in my newfound independence and freedom from her manipulative grasp. My mother's confusion about the inheritance was swiftly met with a reality check. "Of course you haven't received $1,984,000 yet. You're a stranger now," I explained bluntly. "Remember when you fought with Dad and thrust the divorce papers at him? Well, Dad kept those papers for any future eventuality. Before he passed, he used them to officially divorce you, ensuring you won't get a single dollar of the inheritance." Her shock was evident as she realized her extravagant spending and reliance on the inheritance had come to naught. "Oh dear, still so extravagant with money, huh? But that's over now. You'll have to work for the rest of your life," I informed her matter-of-factly. Her response was predictable, demanding that I provide for her and secure her a new house and executive position in the company. I scoffed at her audacity. "Did you ever do anything for me? Don't conveniently bring up our parent-child relationship now. I don't think of you as my mother anymore. Our bond is severed. So please live your life however you like." With that, I cut off contact, setting her number to reject calls, and informing the company reception to report her if she showed up. Meanwhile, my dedication to my work at my father's company remained unwavering. I focused on protecting his legacy and fostering innovation, determined to lead the company to new heights. While my mother spiraled into debt, forced to work part-time jobs to pay off her bills, I found fulfillment in my work. Challenging as it was, I thrived on the opportunity to implement new ideas and strategies, different from my father's, while keeping my curiosity alive. Moving forward, I aim to dedicate myself even further to my work, striving to become a respected business leader and continue the legacy my father had entrusted to me. "She was always in my way and really annoying," my husband said angrily right to the end. It made me wonder if he was even human. He was the worst, not just as a parent, but as a person. I felt sorry and determined to get revenge as I stood in front of everyone at the funeral, reading the letter our daughter left behind. When I read it, my husband's face turned pale. Then my father-in-law angrily asked what I was doing. Revenge was about to begin. "My name is Elma. I'm a 40-year-old housewife. I've been married to Carl for 15 years. We met in high school, became classmates, and eventually started dating. We got closer during a school project and continued dating through college. After college, Carl got his own place, and I often visited him. We both started working, but we still made time for dates and trips. 3 years into our working lives, we decided to get married. Since we had dated since high school, meeting each other's families went smoothly. Our wedding was attended by many people, including our high school classmates. We started our married life happily. 3 years later, our daughter Rosa was born. Carl was thrilled when he held Rosa for the first time. He promised to protect our family, and I thanked him. He seemed so reliable and larger than life. After giving birth, I worked part-time at Carl's company to spend more time with Rosa. Raising her was joyful, and every milestone filled us with excitement. Carl regretted missing some moments, but enjoyed spending time with us on his days off. As Rosa grew, we enjoyed taking her to different places and watching her experience new things. We were excited about her future dreams and the journey she would take. Everything changed when Rosa was in the 3rd grade. I was working part-time when suddenly I got a call from the hospital. Rosa had collapsed during class. I rushed there in a panic, and my husband left work early to join me. The doctor gave us the shocking news. Rosa had a rare disease, and she probably only had about a year to live. We were devastated. As time passed, Rosa grew weaker. 6 months later, she couldn't walk properly and had to stop going to school. We spent most of our time in hospitals or at home. Eventually, she couldn't even get out of bed. I quit my part-time job to take care of her full-time. It was crucial that we supported her with all we had. Around this time, my husband's attitude started to change. He would easily get in a bad mood at home. Even simple things like dinner would set him off. He complained about everything and was always irritable. The atmosphere at home became tense whenever he was around, but it was peaceful when it was just Rosa and me. He started coming home late, claiming it was because of overtime. I felt relieved when he was late because his presence was mentally exhausting, but I also felt lonely. He stopped caring about Rosa and refused to spend time with her, saying it was enough to take care of her during the day. My daughter was fighting hard to live, but my husband couldn't see her efforts. Instead of praising her, he complained about having to be involved as a parent. His overtime increased, and he started staying out overnight without telling me where he was or what he was doing. I couldn't understand why he was so distant and busy all the time. I had developed a dislike for my husband, so the days without him felt more comfortable. Even when he was home, we barely spoke, and he seemed to sense the tension and didn't try to talk to me more than necessary. But my daughter seemed sad about it. "Did you and Dad fall out?" she asked. "You hardly ever talk when you're together. Most of the time, I hear voices and you're fighting." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to worry you," I reassured her. "But it's okay. We're not on bad terms. Dad's just really busy with work, so when he's home, he's resting." "Oh, I see," she said, seeming a little relieved but still sad that her dad wasn't talking to her much. "Did Dad start to dislike me after I got sick?" "That's not true at all," I assured her. "A parent can't hate their child. Like I said, he's just busy with work. Don't worry, he doesn't hate you." After putting our daughter to bed, I sighed. Why am I causing her to worry like this? She's in a life or death situation, and I'm troubling her with this. Summoning my courage, I spoke to my husband when he came home. "Hey, Rosa is feeling lonely. She's wondering if you started to dislike her after she got sick." My husband, who had been listening reluctantly, seemed surprised that our daughter would say such a thing. "Yes, she did. So please, even if it's just a little, talk to her. She's lived past the life expectancy she was given, so it wouldn't be strange if we lost her any time. Let's make sure neither of you has any regrets, okay?" "I got it," he said begrudgingly and in a low voice. The next day, I deliberately created time for just my husband and daughter to be together while I went out for a couple of hours. When I returned home, I asked him if he had talked to Rosa. He said they did, and then announced he was going out to eat with a friend. "Huh. Are you going somewhere?" I asked. "Yeah, I'm going out to eat with a friend. Why don't we all have dinner together as a family?" he replied. "I've been invited, so I can't say no. I've done my part by talking to Rosa. It's time for you to let me go," he said before leaving the house. I felt like nothing had been resolved. Maybe my husband was just going through the motions out of obligation. At that moment, I decided to stop expecting anything from him. It was enough if I cherished our daughter. And that's what I did. They were all smiles in front of Rosa. But once she fell asleep, their faces filled with pain and loneliness. "It really is unfair of God," they said. "Why couldn't it be an old-timer like me instead of a good kid like Rosa?" My parents stayed until the very last minute before my husband was due back. Rosa had been happy to talk to her grandparents after so long. As time went on, Rosa's condition worsened, and she had to be hospitalized. I visited her every day, but my husband never came. Instead, when he returned home early, he would send angry messages on WhatsApp, upset about dinner not being ready. At this point, I thought it would be better if I didn't have a husband who couldn't cherish his own daughter. But without his work, I couldn't spend all this time with her. His work allowed me these moments with her. Not only my parents but also my in-laws came to visit her often at the hospital. Rosa always seemed happy when someone came to see her. We even celebrated her 12th birthday in the hospital room. But about a month after her birthday, Rosa's condition worsened, and she passed away. I was devastated and broke down crying. My parents tried to comfort me, but they ended up crying with me. Still, we had to see Rosa off properly. Together with my parents, I arranged and prepared for the funeral. We arrived early at the funeral parlor, but my husband was irritable about having to get up early. He hadn't been reachable when Rosa passed away, and he had the gall to say he was on a business trip. He tried to light a cigarette in frustration, and I sharply told him to go to the smoking area. As he walked away, he said something awful to our sleeping daughter. "You were such a pain, always in my way, right to the end." I was speechless and rendered motionless by his horrible words. When I came to, I went straight to the coffin. "I'm sorry. I will take revenge in your place," I told my daughter with determination. I could never forgive him. Then the funeral began. Unbelievably, my husband, who had just said such terrible things, pretended to cry in front of the relatives, saying Rosa's name as tears streamed down his face. I knew it was an act because I saw him apply eye drops before walking up to the coffin. The relatives, not knowing any better, misunderstood and started crying too. Unforgivable. I was determined to reveal his true nature, no matter what. As the funeral was drawing to a close, it was time to read the letter left by my daughter. "What? There's a letter?" My husband was clearly surprised, not having known about it. "Yes, there is. I have to properly convey the words she left behind to everyone," I replied. I stood before the funeral attendees and began to read my daughter's letter aloud at the microphone. The letter was mostly words of gratitude to me for the care I had given her. With each word I read, tears came, and I choked up. The relatives also started to cry along. But as I got to the part about my husband, I took a deep breath. To Dad, I read, "Against Mom, who was always by my side, you seemed to avoid coming home as if you were avoiding us. Even when you came home, all I could hear was your voice yelling at her in my room. Dad used to make time to play with me when I was little, taking me on drives to all sorts of places. But after I got sick and became bedridden, Dad seemed like a completely different person. Mom always pretended to be strong in front of me, but I could tell she was really struggling with how Dad was behaving. It hurt me, thinking maybe it was my fault things turned out this way, but it seems that wasn't the case. Remember the day Mom went shopping, and it was just Dad and me at home? You came to my room and talked to me. Then, maybe because Mom asked you to, I was so happy. It felt like the old Dad had come back. But then, thinking I was asleep, you took a phone call. You were talking to a woman I don't know. I heard everything. You were planning a week-long trip. Did you enjoy the Disney trip you went on behind our backs? And you told that woman on the phone that you loved her. Hearing that, I realized you don't care about Mom or me anymore. So please, after I'm gone, divorce Mom. Don't make her unhappy anymore. Let her be free from you." When I finished reading the letter, the room was buzzing. My husband stood there, pale as a ghost. "What the hell are you doing?" My father-in-law's angry voice boomed. The revenge had begun. My husband just stood there, speechless, stuttering, "Ah. Ah." My father-in-law grabbed him by the collar and yelled, "You fool," before striking him across the face. My husband, staggering, denied the affair, saying, "It's not what it looks like. There must be some mistake." But my father-in-law replied, "What's the mistake? Rosa would never lie." My husband stuck to his denials, holding the microphone. "I haven't had an affair," he insisted, but I wasn't buying it. I've already caught you. Stop with the futile resistance, I told him. Yes, I had seen my daughter's letter beforehand and hired a private investigator. I had gathered plenty of evidence of my husband's affair. I showed the photo on my smartphone to everyone at the funeral. All the relatives attending glared at my husband. How could you go on an affair trip when your own child's life was hanging by a thread? You're finished as a human being. I didn't raise you to be such a terrible adult, my parents disowned him. My husband collapsed on the spot, trying to escape the pain. That's no excuse for having an affair. And if that were true, you would have spent more time with Rosa. Don't lie now when we've come so far, I admonished him. Then I heard from his parents that he was asking them for money for Rosa's medical expenses because it was so costly. You exploited your daughter's illness to collect money and have an affair, didn't you? I accused him. Don't give me that. How dare you do such low things and then talk about suffering? Rosa was the one suffering the most, fighting desperately to survive her illness. To have a father like you, Rosa was the one to be pitied, I shouted at him with all my might. He fell on his butt, let out a small yelp, and then hurriedly ran away from the place. After that, I reset and continued with my daughter's funeral. My in-laws apologized deeply and offered to help with the divorce and alimony in any way they could. I proceeded with the divorce and demanded alimony through a lawyer introduced by my father-in-law. But that wasn't enough for me. I took the house my husband had bought and also told everyone at his workplace about what he had done. My ex-husband quickly lost all credibility at the company and was demoted and sent to work in a remote location. He asked his affair partner to come with him, but she promptly dumped him, saying she had no interest in a man without money. In the end, to his affair partner, my ex-husband was just a rich plaything. He was abandoned by his parents and relatives, left to work alone in a distant place, living a lonely life. It's all what he deserves. And honestly, I'd like to beat him up to my heart's content if I could. Meanwhile, I sold the house I got from my ex-husband and moved back to my parents' house. With the alimony from my ex-husband and his affair partner, I had a considerable amount of money. I didn't feel like working for a while after my daughter passed away, but gradually I started to think more positively and began working part-time at a cafe near my parents' house. Mom's homemade cake. Rosa loves it so much. I remember my daughter saying that. Now I bake sweets every day while working at the cafe and honing my pastry skills. I hope to one day serve my own creations on the menu. Just like how my daughter was happy eating my cake, I want to see someone else smiling while eating my cake for my daughter's sake. I have to live my life to the fullest. With that thought, I put my all into working towards my dream. You don't fit in here at the bar with your boring attitude. Maybe you should go drink rainwater instead, since it suits you better. After losing my job, I felt really down. Then, I ran into my annoying ex-boss at the bar. He stole my seat, as usual. But then, something unexpected happened. My name's Michael. I'm 59 years old, and I work at a small toy company called Colorado Toys. I'm not great at talking to people, but I try to be polite to everyone. I even came up with a popular toy, but my colleague Kevin took all the credit. He was good at making himself look good, while dumping his work on others. Because I'm not good at speaking up. My bosses didn't think much of me. Kevin eventually became my boss, and he treated me like I was useless. He'd insult me and make me work overtime. He was right about one thing, though. When I went home, it was lonely. I used to live with my wife and son. My wife was wonderful, always happy, and taking care of our home and son. Our son, Jason, loved playing music and with the toys I made. Seeing him happy made me feel like my work mattered, even if things weren't going well at the office. As long as my family was happy, I was happy too. But those peaceful times didn't last long. When I was 30, my wife got really sick and passed away. I was devastated. I didn't know how to go on without her, but I had Jason. I knew I couldn't stay sad forever, so I focused on taking care of him and our home. At first, it was tough. I wasn't used to doing all the housework and looking after Jason by myself. My cooking was terrible, and Jason missed his mom a lot. He'd have tantrums and cry for her, and I felt the same way. I wished I could see her too, but I hugged Jason tight and promised to do my best for both of us. I wished I could say something more eloquent, but I struggled with words. It was hard, but I got better at running the house over time. As Jason grew up, he started helping me more, which made things easier. Even though we didn't talk as much when he became a teenager, he still pitched in with chores. On his 21st birthday, Jason thanked me for raising him all those years. I was so touched that I cried. Seeing him grow into a kind person was a relief. When he graduated from college and moved out on his own, I was happy for him. But I felt lonely in our empty house. Before I knew it, I was 59 years old. One day at work, my boss, Kevin, came up to me with a smirk. He told me I was fired, saying it was because of downsizing. Even though I hadn't caused any trouble, I hadn't done anything remarkable either. I felt it was unfair, but I couldn't argue. Kevin seemed to enjoy seeing me upset, telling me to enjoy what little time I had left in my working life. I knew I had to tell Jason about losing my job, but it was hard to find the words. But I couldn't keep it from him forever. When I called Jason to tell him, I was nervous. But his response surprised me. He told me I'd done enough, and now I could relax as much as I wanted. I was grateful for his understanding and comfort. However, life after retiring was harder than I thought. At first, it felt good not to deal with Kevin's bullying anymore. But soon, I felt lost and aimless. Watching TV didn't lift my spirits. I realized that work, even with Kevin, had given me purpose. I took pride in making toys and imagining kids playing with them. But now, I couldn't find anything else that made me happy. After 6 months of retirement, I started to feel like I didn't know what I was living for anymore. Sometimes I'd talk to my wife's picture, wondering what I should do next. One day, I saw a TV feature about a beautiful waterfall in a forest. I didn't have any particular interest, but I watched because I had nothing else to do. The waterfall looked so peaceful and calming. I felt drawn to it. To change my mood, I decided to visit the waterfall. It had been a while since I felt motivated to do something on my own. Leaving my sadness behind, I quickly got ready for the trip. When the day arrived, I didn't hesitate. I reached the forest and felt the crisp, refreshing air. The trees were green and beautiful. After about an hour of walking, I saw the waterfall. It was even more stunning in person. Just watching the water flow was soothing. Since it was a weekday, there weren't many people around. As I was thinking of finding a spot to sit, I noticed a young woman sitting nearby. She seemed to be in pain with her swollen foot. I asked if she was okay, and she tried to smile, but it was clear she needed help. She had come to the forest by rental car, and it would be hard for her to walk back alone. I'd offered to take her to the hospital, and she seemed relieved. "So I can give you a lift? Please don't push yourself," I offered. The woman hesitated, but I assured her, "Please don't feel obliged." Eventually, she relented and said, "Please, I would appreciate that." I twisted my ankle walking in the forest. I didn't want to return without seeing the waterfall, so I pushed myself, but it got worse. I supported her out of the forest and drove her to the hospital in my rental car. The doctor said it's not serious, that she needed to rest for a while. Afterward, I took her to the hotel where she was staying. Her name was Emily, and she loved traveling. Emily told me about the various tourist places she had visited. She was a great storyteller, and listening to her made me want to visit those places. Surprisingly, the conversation flowed smoothly even though it was our first meeting. We continued chatting even after arriving at her hotel room. During our conversation, I learned that Emily lived in the same town as me and even knew about my former workplace. It's surprising how well she knew about such a small company. Eventually, the topic changed, and she asked, "Why did you come here, Michael?" After some hesitation and wondering where to start, I ended up telling her everything from the beginning. "Well, actually, I got fired from my job." Despite it not being the kind of story you typically share with someone you just met, I said. Emily listened to it all. It turned out that she had also quit her job due to exhausting office relationships and understood my situation. Her love for travel began as a way to refresh herself by visiting different places around the country. For all the hardship you faced, I'm sure good things are ahead in your life, she comforted me. Her empathy touched me deeply, and I was grateful. Despite the unexpected events, it turned out to be a heartwarming trip. After returning from the trip, I received a call from Jason. He invited me out, saying, "There's a great bar I know. How about we go for a drink?" It may be nosy of me, but I was worried you might have been feeling lonely, Dad. Let's go out and have a good time. I have a lot to talk about too. Not nosy at all. It's true that I've been living a lonely life lately, I admitted. I appreciated Jason's concern. Come to think of it, it had been a long time since Jason and I had a drink together. I think the last time was on his 21st birthday. The thought of drinking with my son after so long lifted my spirits, and I quickly agreed. Unfortunately, it was pouring rain on the day of our appointment. Still, the thought of seeing Jason made the rain seem less dreary. Bothered, I took the train and arrived at the designated bar. But Jason hadn't shown up yet. The place was bustling, and most seats were taken. Luckily, there was one empty seat near the entrance, so I took it. As I perused the menu, the bar door swung open. I glanced up and was shocked to see Kevin walk in. He noticed me too, initially looking surprised before his expression turned mocking. "Well, well, what a coincidence to see you here, enjoying life after getting fired," he said, taking a seat opposite me. My son is supposed to join me soon. I'm sorry, but could you please find another seat?" I requested. Kevin's eyes narrowed, and he waved dismissively, saying, "Why should I care? I want to drink here too. Besides, I'm a regular. I should be given priority." His demands seemed ridiculous, but Kevin persisted, insulting me further. Feeling uncomfortable and not wanting to cause a scene, I reluctantly decided to wait for another seat. As I stood up, the door opened again, and to my surprise, Jason walked in with Emily. "What a coincidence to meet here. This is amazing," I exclaimed, surprised. Emily, however, seemed unfazed. "Meeting you here isn't a coincidence. Jason and I know each other and have an important matter to discuss, so we came together," she explained. Bewildered by this turn of events, I sat back down as Emily confidently approached Kevin's table. Kevin demanded to know who she was, but Emily, undeterred, took a seat and declared that they should discuss matters then and there. Surprised by her assertiveness, I sat down as instructed. Emily then dropped a bombshell. She was the daughter of the president of Colorado Toys, the company I used to work for. Meeting her while traveling was a stroke of incredible luck. Kevin was visibly taken aback as Emily continued, revealing that she had questioned her father about my firing and found out it was due to reports of poor work performance. I couldn't believe it, so I shared the story of our encounter during my travels with my father, insisting on a proper investigation. My father agreed to look into it, seeing how earnestly I pleaded. Emily glared sharply at Kevin. It turned out that Kevin had lied about my work performance, negatively influencing the management's opinion of me. "What evidence do you have for that?" "It's a false accusation," Kevin protested, his face turning pale. Emily remained calm. We obtained testimonies from Michael's former colleagues. They all unanimously said Michael was a good person. "It's strange that he was fired," she explained. Kevin's face now turned red with anger. "Those traitors," he exclaimed. Emily spoke with an air of disdain. "If you must blame someone, blame yourself for your foolish actions. You will soon face the consequences. Be prepared." Kevin stood up, moving aggressively towards Emily. I was about to intervene when a stern-looking waiter approached. His name tag read Manager Brian. He gave Kevin a stern look. "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you please leave? Your loud voice is disturbing other customers." "How dare you speak to a regular like me that way?" Despite Kevin's high-handed attitude, Brian responded firmly in a low voice. "I'll just say it as it is. You're a troublesome customer. When you get drunk, You cause issues with other patrons, and we've received complaints asking us to deal with it. We'd rather not have a regular like you." Chastened by Brian, Kevin turned pale and hastily left the bar. I thanked Brian profusely. "Thank you so much. You really helped us out." "It's no problem at all," Brian replied with a hearty smile before returning to the back of the bar. Afterward, Jason, Emily, and I decided to have a good time together. Emily and Jason had two important things to share. The first was about Kevin's misconduct. It was pure coincidence that Kevin was at the bar, and both were as surprised as I was. The second was a delightful piece of news. Emily and Jason were in a relationship and considering marriage. Their meeting story was quite touching. Emily, after graduating from university, had joined a major corporation on her own merit. However, once Emily's identity as the company president's daughter became known, baseless rumors spread that she had gotten the job through connections. No matter how hard she worked, she couldn't gain trust, leading to a difficult time. One day, she saw a man playing a street piano at a station. It was Jason. After graduating from a music college, Jason had been working as a pianist, performing across the country. According to Emily, Jason's performance was wonderful, and just listening to it felt like a balm for her soul. She approached Jason to thank him after his performance, but she was so moved that she found herself in tears. Concerned, Jason listened to her story and suggested she travel around the country. He often traveled for work and believed unexpected encounters and discoveries enriched the heart. Upon hearing that, Emily decided to quit her job and set out on her travels. As she kept in touch with Jason during her journey, they grew closer and eventually started dating. Jason had arranged this meetup to introduce Emily and simultaneously cheer me up. Naturally, I supported their relationship and congratulated them. "Congratulations. I'm looking forward to the wedding," I said. Jason laughed and said, "We haven't even decided when to get married yet." "You're getting ahead of yourself." But he looked pleased. The three of us then enjoyed a pleasant meal and drinks together. It seemed that Brian, the manager, had overheard our conversation as he kindly provided us with some complimentary dishes. A few days after the incident at the bar, I heard from Emily that Kevin had been fired. It turned out he was not only harassing others but also embezzling company funds. Apparently, his family had enough and left him. Meanwhile, I returned to work and got involved in toy development again. My past achievements were recognized and I was promoted. Now able to fully utilize my skills, I launched new products one after another, contributing greatly to the company's growth. Many consumers thanked me for the wonderful toys, which was incredibly gratifying. Jason and Emily were also delighted with my success. As kids, they loved the toys I developed, so their happiness meant even more to me. Recently, they celebrated their wedding, and they are now enjoying a blissful married life. Influenced by Emily, I've grown quite fond of traveling, often taking trips on weekends. My personal life has finally become fulfilling, and living feels enjoyable now. There was a time when I was worried about what the future held, but now it seems life will be good. It felt like my wife in heaven was smiling down at me, reassured. I switched from dealing with a lot of problems at work to working at a candy store with Ben. It was a big change, but I liked it. Before, I was always busy fixing things at my job, but now I was surrounded by sweet treats. Ben's family owned the store, and soon I was helping with the money stuff. Our shop was doing well, and one Monday, Ben greeted me with a smile. Even though there was some tension, his smile made me happy. I mentioned that our sales were up because people loved the new chocolate we had. But Ben seemed a bit bothered. He joked about his mom still thinking he's the best at running the candy store. Then his mom, Linda, came in. She praised Ben but made a little jab at me. I tried to stay calm and just said good morning. Linda hinted that I should leave the business stuff to the experts and focus on helping Ben with the real work. Before things could get too tense, Ben defended me and said we were doing great. Because she's good at business, he said, slipping an arm around me to show he had my back. Linda didn't seem convinced, but she left us alone after saying as long as Ben was happy. That's what mattered. Ben apologized quietly for his mom's behavior. I tried to brush it off, saying it didn't bother me. We focused on running the shop together. Sugar Haven wasn't just a candy store anymore, it was our special place. But then things started to go wrong. Deliveries came more often, but they weren't candy. They were expensive things that made me worry about our finances. One evening, I found Ben opening a fancy new phone he'd ordered. I asked him if it was really necessary, considering other things we needed for the shop. But he shrugged it off, saying we deserved nice things too. It wasn't just the phone. Linda was also spending a lot, showing off new clothes all the time as if the store was her own personal runway. "Look at this dress, Anna, isn't it lovely?" Linda twirled around in a floral dress that seemed way too expensive for our budget. "It's nice," I said, trying to sound indifferent. "But shouldn't we save up to fix the sign outside?" Linda brushed off my concern, patting Ben's cheek. "Nonsense, the store is doing great, Benjamin, tell her." Ben, who was only half paying attention, agreed with his mom. "Yeah, we're doing fine, Anna, don't worry." But worrying was exactly what I did. Every time I checked our finances, I saw the numbers didn't add up. Doing great wasn't the term I'd use when our profits were being eaten up by personal spending. "I'm just saying we should be cautious." I brought it up again later that week as we looked at our finances. "Maybe we should set a budget for personal expenses." Ben looked at me like I'd suggested something absurd. "A budget? Come on, Anna, we're not that bad, and it's not like you to be stingy." That word stung. I wasn't being stingy. I was being sensible. "It's not about being stingy, Ben. It's about being smart. We have to think about the future of Sugar Haven." He didn't seem to hear me, already scrolling through a website for another purchase. "You worry too much," he said, half distracted. "It'll all work out." Things took a turn when Linda decided to bring in extra help. It was a Tuesday, our inventory day, and I was knee-deep in organizing candy jars when she walked in with a girl who couldn't have been older than 20. "Anna, this is Tessa," Linda announced proudly. "Tessa, dear, this is Anna, my son's assistant." I straightened up, wiping my hands on my apron. "Nice to meet you, Tessa, but I'm actually the co-manager here." Tessa smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've heard a lot about you. I'm really excited to be part of the team." I glanced at Linda, whose smug look told me she hadn't consulted Ben about this new hire. "What exactly will Tessa be assisting with?" I asked, trying to keep my tone friendly. "Oh, she's going to help out with the business side of things. You can only do so much after all," Linda said, dismissing my concerns with a glance at my inventory list. I nodded, still confused. "All right. Well, we have a system here, so I'll have to bring her up to speed." It didn't take long for me to realize that Tessa's idea of helping out involved more hovering than actual work, and when I saw the salary Linda had set for her, I was shocked. "Ben, can we talk?" I cornered him later that day in the office. "Sure, what's up?" he asked, not looking up from his computer. "It's about Tessa. Her salary is? It's more than what we can afford for the role she's in." Then finally looked up, his brow furrowing. "Mom said it was fine. She thinks Tessa's going to bring a lot to the table." I sighed, feeling like I was talking to a wall. But we agreed to discuss new hires together, especially when it comes to how much we're paying them. He shrugged, that annoyingly dismissive gesture becoming more frequent. "What's done is done. Mom has a good feeling about her." I had to bite back a retort. Good feelings didn't balance books. I left the office feeling like I was the only one seeing the red flags, while Ben and his mother were content to parade around with blindfolds on. I've always been someone who double checks, maybe even triple checks, especially when it comes to numbers. So when I found an envelope stuffed in the back of a filing cabinet while looking for a misplaced invoice, my first thought was that it was just another forgotten bill. But as I went through the papers, my heart started racing, not from excitement, but from cold dread. It was a loan document with Sugar Haven listed as collateral, and the amount was far more than reasonable for our small shop. "Ben," I said, walking into his cluttered office with the papers in hand. "What is this?" He glanced up, and I saw guilt flicker in his eyes, the first sign of it I'd seen in months. Oh, that? It's nothing. Just a small loan I took out to cover, store improvements. Store improvements? I echoed, incredulous. This amount could renovate the store 5 times over. What did you really use it for? There was a pause, and I could tell he was choosing his words carefully. Okay, look, he started. I might have used some of it for the house. The one I've been working on for us. For us? I repeated sharply, disbelief in my voice. Or for your gadgets and whatever else you've been blowing money on? He stood up, his chair scraping back, a sound that grated on my patience. It's not like that, Anna. You don't understand. This is all going to pay off in the end. No, Ben, taking out a loan against the store without telling me, that's what I don't understand. How could you be so reckless? Before he could answer, Linda bustled in, her nose wrinkling as she saw the papers in my hand. What's all this about? She demanded. Ben tried to explain, but I cut him off, thrusting the loan papers at her. Did you know about this? She barely glanced at the documents before waving them off. Of course I did. Ben's just doing what's necessary for our future. And who are you? Questioned him. You're just the help after all. The words stung, but they also ignited something inside me. Just the help? I said, my voice low but firm. I've been keeping the store afloat while you two have been treating it like your personal bank account. What's ungrateful is not recognizing the hard work someone's been putting into this business. What's foolish is risking everything for a house that we don't even need. I waited for them to say something, to defend themselves, but all they did was stare at me, caught in the act. I left the room then, the documents clutched in my hand like a verdict yet to be delivered. The kitchen table was never meant for business meetings, but that day it was surrounded by solemn faces, as if we were about to discuss matters of state instead of the confectionery. Ben cleared his throat, his eyes not quite meeting mine. We need to talk about the store's future. I sat down, folding my hands on the table. We already did that when I found the loan documents, I said firmly. Linda huffed from across the table, her arms crossed. We need to be realistic, Anna. The store isn't pulling in enough to cover the debts. We have to find money somewhere. There it was, the we that really meant me. I kept my voice steady. What do you suggest? Her eyes gleamed with a cold calculation. You have that inheritance from your parents. It could cover the debts and get the store back on its feet. I felt like I was listening to a stranger, not the woman whose son I had married. You want me to use my parents' money? The money they left for me, for my future? Ben finally spoke up. It's not like you're doing anything else with it. That money was meant for me, for my security, I said, disbelief clear in my voice. And what about our security? Linda shot back. You're part of this family now, aren't you? I looked between them, my heart sinking. I am, but it seems you only remember that when you need something from me. Ben shifted uncomfortably. It's not like that, but we're drowning here, Anna. So you expect me to just hand over my future, just like that? I asked. Linda leaned forward. If you care about this family, yes. I thought of the sacrifices I had made for the store, the long hours, the sleepless nights. If I do this, if I invest my inheritance, I want 1/3 of the store. I want to be an official co-owner. The room fell silent. Then Linda laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the walls. You, a co-owner? Don't be ridiculous. You're not business material. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Then you find another way to cover your debts, because my inheritance is not your emergency fund. Ben's face was unreadable, but Linda's was red with anger. You'd let this family business go under? I've tried to save it, I said, my voice quiet but firm. But I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm. I wasn't one for late-night visits to the shop, but something in my gut told me to go to Sugar Haven that evening. The place was dark, as expected, but the faint glow of a light from the back office wasn't. I pushed the door open, the familiar tinkle of the bell sounding almost ominous in the silence. The sweet scent of confectionery, which usually comforted me, now felt heavy, loaded with the scent of betrayal. As I walked towards the back, the murmurs from the office grew clearer, and then I saw them, through the partly open door. Ben, with his arms around the new assistant Tessa, who giggled at something he whispered in her ear. I pushed the door open fully, and they sprang apart, their expressions turning from shock to guilt within seconds. "Anna," Ben stammered, straightening his shirt. "What are you?" "It's not what it looks like." I crossed my arms, feeling a cold calm settle over me. "Really?" "Because it looks like I just caught my husband with his arms around another woman." Tessa was smoothing her hair back, looking anywhere but at me. "We were just going over inventory at midnight with the inventory in your arms," I said, my tone dry. Ben's eyes were pleading now. "Anna, please, you're blowing this out of proportion." I laughed, short and humorless. "Am I?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty clear to me." He took a step towards me, and I held up a hand. "Save it, Ben. I don't know what's worse, the cheating or the pathetic lies." Tessa finally spoke up, her voice small. "I'm sorry, Anna. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I looked at her, really looked at her, young, naive, and caught in the web of a man who couldn't take responsibility for his actions. "You should be. And you should also be looking for another job." Ben's protest was immediate. "You can't fire her for this." I turned to him, my resolve steeling. "I can, and I will. And I'll be looking for a good lawyer in the morning." His face paled. "Anna, please, let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, cutting him off. "You've made your choices. Now you get to live with them." I didn't wait for his response. I walked out of there with my head held high, the sound of Ben calling after me fading into the background. The morning after I caught Ben was bright, a stark contrast to the mood in our home. I'd spent the night at my own place, the one I kept as a rental property. As I sat at the kitchen table, my phone buzzed with a message from Ben. I considered not even reading it. But curiosity got the better of me. It was a photo of a bank letter addressed to Ben, with the words "Final Notice, Immediate Repayment Required," standing out beneath it. He typed a message, "We need to talk. This is serious." I typed back a simple, "On my way," and got ready to face the music. When I arrived at the confectionery, Ben and Linda were already there, pacing like caged animals. Linda spotted me first, and her expression soured. "Decided to show up, did you?" she snapped as I walked in. I nodded, holding her gaze. "You wanted to talk." Ben held out the letter to me. "The bank's coming down hard. We could lose everything." I scanned the letter, the numbers not surprising me but still making my stomach turn. "So what's your plan?" Linda's plan was apparently to glare daggers at me. "We wouldn't be in this mess if you just helped us when we asked." Ignoring her, I addressed Ben. "What are you going to do?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking defeated. I thought you could pay it off with your inheritance." My laugh was bitter. "And I told you, I'm not doing that without a stake in the business." Linda stepped forward. "You're being unreasonable, Anna. This is a family business." I met her challenge with a calm I didn't feel. "And where was this family when your son was spending money we don't have and hiring his friends for fun?" Ben started to say something but stopped, his eyes dropping to the floor. "You don't get to play the family card. Only when it suits you," I continued. "We'll figure something else out," then Ben muttered. "You'll have to," I agreed. Then Linda did something unexpected. She smiled, but it wasn't pleasant. "Fine, but if you're not going to help, then you're out. We'll manage without you. You're fired." I stared at her, letting the silence stretch out before I matched her smile with my own. "Okay." Their surprise was almost comical. "Just like that?" Ben asked, his voice incredulous. "Just like that," I confirmed. "But I want you to know, I took photos of you and Tessa. I have records of all the money you've wasted. If you think you can fire me and sweep all this under the rug, you're wrong." Linda's smile vanished. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, but I would. And when I leave, I'm taking all my hard work with me. You can explain to the bank why the business is about to tank without the person who was actually running it." Months had passed since I last set foot in Sugar Haven, and life had taken on a new kind of normal. The crisp sound of papers, the hum of focused conversations, and the sight of a crisis managed and resolved. These had replaced the scent of sugar and spice. I sat in my new office, a stark contrast to the confectioner's back room. When my phone rang, I glanced at the caller ID. It was Claire, a former employee at the shop, and the only one I still talked to. "Hey Claire, what's up?" I greeted with a hint of caution. News about Sugar Haven always carried a tinge of the past. "You haven't heard." Claire's voice was a mix of pity and discomfort. "The shop, they closed down last week. The bank foreclosed on them, and the house too." I leaned back in my chair, a weight lifting off my shoulders that I hadn't realized was there. "I see, and Ben and his mother." There was a pause. "They're not doing great. Rumor has it they've moved in with his aunt. No one's seen them much." I sighed, not quite sure how to feel. "Thanks for letting me know, Claire." She hesitated before adding, "Anna, everyone knows you were the heart of that place. It was never the same after you left." A small, sad smile touched my lips. "I appreciate you saying that. How about you? Found a new job yet?" "Yeah, I'm working at a bakery downtown. It's not Sugar Haven, but it's a start." "That's great to hear. You always had a talent for baking. I'm sure you'll do well there." We chatted for a few more minutes before saying goodbye. I hung up and looked out the window at the bustling street below. There was a knock at my door, and my assistant peeked in. "Your 3 o'clock is here, Anna." "Thanks." "Send them in," I responded, shaking off the remnants of nostalgia. The clients came in, a husband and wife team, looking worried about their own business. I stood to greet them, ready to dive into another challenge. "We've heard great things about you, Anna," the wife said as we sat down. "They say you're the best crisis manager in town." I smiled, the title sitting comfortably with me. "I'll do my best to live up to that reputation. Now tell me about your business, and let's see how we can turn things around." As they spoke, I listened, already forming strategies in my mind. This was my world now, where every problem had a solution, and every crisis was an opportunity. The meeting stretched on, the client's initial anxiety giving way to hopeful smiles as we discussed possibilities. They left with a renewed sense of purpose, and I turned back to my desk, my heart lighter than it had been in a long time. In the end, I realized that sometimes the sweetest outcomes come after the most bitter trials, and the future was mine to create, one careful step at a time. I never liked long, emotional goodbyes or thinking too much about life's ups and downs. I'm Amelia, 35 years old, a manager. That's all you need to know. I stood there with my suitcase, sweating, feeling the weight of each step as I made my not-so-graceful exit. At the bottom of the stairs, Jeremy smirked at me, thinking I couldn't make it without his money. Linda, always making snide remarks, sat on the couch like she was queen of the world. And Zoe, the new girl, looked uncomfortable, sitting so stiffly. I packed my things, trying to stay calm, but it felt strange to be so ordinary at what felt like the end of everything. Jeremy teased me, asking where my tears were, thinking I was miserable, but I wasn't having it. Linda suggested we have dinner together one last time, daring me to break. The idea seemed crazy. Why would I dine with my ex and his new arm candy? But I couldn't resist the chance to show them I wasn't leaving as a defeated wife. So I surprised everyone and said yes. Zoe looked shocked, not expecting me to join them. Jeremy's smirk faded a bit as he offered to get wine, his attempt at being polite. Linda sent Zoe to fetch it, treating her like a child. Poor Zoe, trying so hard to fit in with those high heels and unsure steps. As we sat down to eat, tension filled the room. Linda smirked, taking a jab at my cooking skills. I forced a smile, thanking her and trying to keep calm. Across from me, Jeremy looked uncomfortable, his face turning red. It was going to be a long night. This dinner was more like a chess game than a meal. Every move needed to be calculated if I wanted to leave with my dignity intact. You know, jobs don't just appear out of nowhere. And the last place? Well, they couldn't see a good worker if one smacked them in the face. I couldn't help but chuckle. A good worker, Jay. They practically kicked you out. How much did they say you cost, Em? A couple of thousand? Zoe, with a hint of curiosity, poked at her salad, not really eating. Jeremy tensed up, his grip tightening around his knife. It was blown out of proportion, he said, his jaw clenching. I made a small mistake. Amelia was just an easy target. Being late and missing deadlines suddenly made me the villain. I replied calmly, taking a sip from my glass. Linda jumped in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Accidents happen, right? But Zoe, dear, you must be careful. Clumsiness can run in the family. Zoe gave a tight-lipped smile, her eyes fixed on her plate. Jeremy desperately tried to change the subject. Let's not dwell on the past. I'm focusing on the future. I leaned back, smirking. Sounds grand, Jay, hopefully. This time the future doesn't have a repeat ending. As an uncomfortable silence settled, Linda cleared her throat, signaling a change of subject. So, any plans after today, dear? Packing up? I glanced around, firm in my resolve. First good night's sleep in months, I reckon, I said, finally putting down my fork. Zoe, eager to contribute, spoke up. Oh, it's nothing much. Just an opening in the admin department. Might be something for you to look at. Surprised, I thanked her. Thanks, Zoe. I might just take a look. The meal continued, tension replaced by mundane chatter. Linda eyed me like a hawk, waiting for another opportunity to strike. So tell me, she said with a smirk, still living out of that tiny apartment. I pushed my salad around, barely suppressing a smile. Actually, Linda, I'll be moving soon. Got a low place closer to work now. It's mine. Jeremy choked on his drink, coughing into his napkin. You, a house? Where'd you get that sort of cash? He sputtered. Well, if you'd bothered to ask me about my life in the past year, I said, cutting into my steak, you'd know about the money Grandma left me. All $700,000 of it. His eyes widened greedily. That's half mine. Jeremy blurted out, his fork clattering onto his plate. Linda chimed in, absolutely, Jeremy. Married means shared assets. But I leaned back, letting out a laugh. Funny how you'd forget the prenup you shoved in my face. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours, wasn't it? Zoe, sitting next to Jeremy with a plate of untouched food, looked at me with a mix of shock and disgust. Poor thing probably didn't sign up for this soap opera. Jeremy's face turned tomato red. That's before I knew you were coming into money, he shouted. I took another bite, savoring not just the meal, but the victory. That's just tough luck, I say, giving him a wink. Zoe's eyes dart between us, clearly regretting her choice for the night. Maybe for more than just tonight. And Jeremy? Well, he's in full tantrum mode now, his napkin thrown down with a dramatic flourish. You know what? This is crap. You can't just. I cut him off. Oh, but I can. And it seems like I just did. Dinner goes on, and with every petty jab they throw, I parry with the ease of someone with nothing to lose. Because in this tacky dining room with its gaudy chandelier and suffocating small talk, I've never felt freer. After all, there's no place like my own new home, however small and on the other side of town it may be. The sharp scent of roasted chicken mingles with the tang of tension in the air. The dining room feels smaller with every word Linda spits out. And tomorrow? Linda's cheeks flushed the same shade as the wine in her glass. I'm calling Mark. You'll be out of a job before you can say unemployment. Everyone at the table could hear the scrape of the knife against the plate as Jeremy cuts into his chicken a little too forcefully. The sound rings out like an alarm, but I can't help it. I start laughing. It bubbles out uncontrollably, a response so absurd against the backdrop of Linda's scowl. What's so funny? Linda practically hisses, her fork hovering midair. Jeremy's eyes are wide like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. The room goes still, ready for the drama to explode. Straightening up, I wipe the corner of my eye, still chuckling. You too? I say, shaking my head. You don't know the half of it. Their gazes are like hooks, waiting for the punchline. 4 months ago, I landed a new job. Head of a department at a big trading company. Paychecks double what I used to make. Silence slams into the room like a wave. Linda's fork drops with a clatter. But it's Jeremy's face I savor. The mix of horror and envy is almost delicious. No, Jeremy finally mutters, his voice a mix of disbelief and resentment. Yep, I pop the pea like bubblegum. And as for calling in favors, I don't need your connections anymore. Then, as if on cue, the doorbell rings. That'll be the movers, I say, shoving my chair back. The screech of its legs against the floor is a fitting soundtrack to Linda's dropped jaw. I saunter to the door, heart pounding but free. Opening it, there they are, a couple of burly guys with Hank's Moving Company stitched on their caps. We're here for your stuff, one of them says, more stating than questioning. Yep, everything that belongs to me that I acquired even before I got involved with my hubby. I say, hitching a thumb toward the dining room where my soon-to-be ex-life was crumbling. The mover shrugs and shuffles by, heading straight for the dining room. Their heavy boots thud on the hardwood, every step a nail in the coffin of this uncomfortable evening. Linda is standing now, her napkin forgotten on her plate. You can't do this, she says, but the bite is gone from her voice. Oh, but I am. There was a sense of joy saying that out loud. Watching her struggle for words, Jeremy was hunched at the table, his face buried in his palms, the lines of his back tight like a strong bow. Come on, don't do this, not the sofa. Remember our movie nights? His voice was a soft plea, a distant echo from a time that felt like a different life. I shook my head firmly. The sofa's mine. Jay bought it with my own cash, and you know it. Turning to the movers, I pointed at the bulky behemoth of a couch. That thing needs to go first. Careful with it, it's pricier than it looks. Zoe sat frozen, her eyes wide like saucers. She looked like she wanted to melt into the woodwork. Linda was still shaking her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. You're cleaning us out, girl. What are we supposed to sit on? The floor. Should have thought of that before Jeremy decided to play house with Miss Sunshine here. I didn't bother hiding the bitterness as I swept my hand towards Zoe. The movers were a symphony of grunts and commands, hefting up my furniture with practiced ease. The TV came off the wall with a pop. The dining table was dismantled with a clatter, and even the damn washing machine was unhooked with a series of clangs and splashes. Jeremy finally stood up, pushing away from the table. You think you've won? His voice wobbled with anger, his nostrils flaring. Checkmate, I quipped, heading back towards the kitchen. Plates of uneaten food gazed up at me as I grabbed a bottle of soda, popping the cap and taking a swig. It wasn't champagne, but the fizz tasted like victory. The movers began hauling boxes, the heavy sound of cardboard thumping against the front door as they passed in and out. I walked back into the dining room, grabbing a few last personal items, a picture frame, a ceramic cat Jeremy always hated, and my favorite mug. All right, but the car too? Jeremy stood up, his face flushed a deep red. You can't be serious. How am I supposed to get to work? I fished the car keys from my pocket, twirling them around my finger. You shouldn't have read the fine print, baby. That car's in my name. I tossed the keys to one of the movers. Park it outside my new place, will you? By the time we were done, the house was as bare as a skeleton, stripped clean. Linda sat on the hardwood floor, her back against the wall, while Jeremy stared through the gaping space where the TV once was. And before I turned to leave, with one last look at the shell of our shared past, I said, You should thank me, really. It's not every day you get a fresh start, free from all the old junk. Linda was fuming, her hands clenched into fists that kept opening and closing. You're nothing without this family, she spat out, every word a poison dart. Funny thing was, I felt lighter than I had in years. I looked at her, at Jeremy, at the life I was leaving behind. Jeremy watched me, eyes reading his chest heaving like he was running out of air. Greed, anger, regret. They were written all over him. And I knew, even as I turned my back on that chapter, I would never forget that look. Escaping the clamor of Jeremy's house, I breathed deep. The cool air was a slap to my skin, a wake-up call. I was free, but Jeremy wasn't going to let go without a fight. You think you've won, huh? Jeremy's voice came from behind the door. You'll regret this, mark my words. You'll end up just an old hag with a bunch of cats. I could hear the anger boiling in his veins. I didn't care. Done was done, and I was out of there. I was nearly at my car when the front door burst open again. There was Jeremy, red-faced and pompous. You know, I've got Zoe now. She's half your age and twice as hot. His barb was meant to wound, but it missed its mark, because right then Zoe herself appeared, flinging Jeremy's arm off her like it was a filthy rag. Keep dreaming, Jay, she snapped. She didn't even glance my way as she stomped down the steps, fury in her heels. She was done playing the pretty little girlfriend prop. Jeremy stumbled after her like a man who'd just been kicked in the gut. Zoe, babe, don't be like that. Come on. But Zoe spun around, and the look she shot him would have curdled milk. Like what, Jeremy? Like someone who just saw the light. You're a jerk, and your mama. She's a dictator in a floral apron. I ain't marrying into this circus. The color drained from Jeremy's face quicker than a leak in a balloon. He spluttered, no comebacks, no charm. This is it, Jeremy. We are done. Zoe's words were like nails in a coffin, precise and final. Jeremy's mother, Linda, had appeared in the doorway too, her face twisted like she'd swallowed something nasty. Zoe, you can't leave my boy. We have plans for you, she hissed, probably thinking of wedding bells and grandkids. But Zoe wasn't having a bar of it. I said I'm done. Go find another puppet for your little show. She stormed off, her heels clicking like a ticking time bomb. There I was, leaning against my car, trying real hard not to let the grin split my face. Watching Jeremy and Linda shrink in the rearview mirror felt better than I'd imagined. Hey, and don't think you've gotten away with this, Jeremy was shouting, but his words were like rain against my car window, persistent but insignificant. I rolled down the window a sliver, just enough to let my voice carry. Actually, I think I just did. I gave him a look, one that said I knew I'd won, then rolled the window back up before he could spew another word. I hit the gas and didn't look back. In my rear view, Jeremy's figure got smaller, his rage drowned out by the growl of the engine. Ahead of me, the street stretched out, the night just beginning to shimmer with possibilities. Looking at the empty seat next to me, I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a twinge of something like triumph, sweet and raw, no regrets, no looking back. When my phone buzzed that morning, the last name I expected to flash on the screen was Zoe. Yeah, that's her. The doll whose sharp tongue and don't-care attitude had sent Jeremy and his mother, Linda, home with their tails between their legs. My lips curled into a smug grin. I swiped at the screen. Hey, Zoe, I said, leaning back on my kitchen counter, a little confused. Hey, it's me. Just thought I'd ring you up, to say thanks, her voice chirped through. For what? I leaned back on my kitchen counter, a little confused, but curious for yesterday, you were freaking badass, opening my eyes about Jeremy and Linda. That? I laughed. It was a cold laugh, no joy in it, trust me. I didn't do anything. You saw them for what they are, all on your own. Yeah, well, I just wanted to say I appreciate it, so thank you, she insisted. I could hear the genuine tone in her voice. No problem, just watch your back, okay? We said our goodbyes and hung up. The phone felt heavy in my hand as I tapped it against my chin, pondering the weirdness of it all. I had just been thanked by the woman who was fooling around with my ex-husband for helping her dodge a bullet. Life sure was strange. I mulled over my conversation with Zoe while I threw together a sandwich, the heel of the bread, some old cheese, and that last sorry slice of ham. I wasn't in the mood for anything fancy. I slumped down at my tiny kitchen table, taking a bite out of the uneven sandwich. I chewed slowly, the bread dry and sticking to the roof of my mouth. That could have been me, stuck in that cycle with Jeremy and Linda. But it wasn't. I had broken free. Later that day, I sat down with a pen and a notepad. I was old school like that. A thank you note. Never thought I'd write one of those to my ex's side chick, but here we were. I scribbled quickly, not fussing over the words, just letting them spill out raw. And I told Zoe she was welcome, that she was better off now, even if it didn't seem like it yet. I told her to keep her head high and to never let some two-timing jerk and his manipulative mom tell her who she was. And I signed it simply, with no flares or niceties. The note was brief, to the point. It was enough. I sealed it in an old envelope I found in a drawer, grabbed my keys, and headed out. I dropped the letter in the mailbox, no need for face-to-face. The words said it all. Walking back to my apartment, I kicked at a stray pebble. Life had given me lemons, and I didn't make lemonade. I threw those lemons back hard, and now I was helping others do the same. I had made peace with my past, with Jeremy, and surprisingly, I had made peace with Zoe too. The world kept turning, bizarre as it was, but at least for today, it was turning in my favor. The lawyer had one of them smirks when he handed me the last paper. "It's all yours now," he said, loud enough for Jeremy to hear across the room. "Nice doing business with you," I said, rolling my eyes a bit as I took the paperwork. The ink felt fresh and symbolic, the full stop at the end of a long, dragged-out story. Jeremy didn't say nothing. He just stood there, looking like someone had taken the ground from under him, probably realizing his mom's plan had backfired. Linda, she had a face like thunder, her lips thin like she'd been sucking on lemons. "Can you believe this?" After everything I did, Linda's voice trailed off into a sort of hiss. I didn't answer, just clutched my papers a bit tighter as I walked out of the courthouse building and into my little car, that old thing that survived the marriage far better than I did. I caught Linda's eye. She was staring at me from her big shiny car, probably feeling her age and her mistakes. "You got what you wanted, huh?" Jeremy puffed out as he caught up with me, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, shoulders hunched. I turned to him, the feeling of being finally free making me bold. "No, Jeremy, I got what I deserved. There's a difference." My phone beeped, a message from Stella, a friend who'd stuck by me like glue. "Drinks tonight?" she asked. I couldn't help but smile. Stella got it. "Hell yes," I texted back, slipping into the driver's seat. There was a quiet. Not the uneasy quiet like at Jeremy's place, but the kind that lets you hear yourself think. As the engine came to life with a familiar rattle, I felt something twist in my stomach. Excitement, nerves. My new home felt different now. I stepped inside, the echo of my footsteps the only welcome, but it was enough. My eyes roamed over the place. It was a mess of boxes and furniture that had seen better days, but it was mine. I spent the next few hours moving stuff around, unpacking, and tossing what I didn't need. I made room, my room, a space that felt more like me by the minute. Next day, I drove to work. Work was the kind of busy that kept thoughts at bay and made the day fly by. At lunch, the girls were all ears. "You okay, Jess?" the office gossip asked, her eyes all concern and curiosity. "Better than okay," I answered, with no shadow of a lie. The drive home was meditative. The road stretched like my future. Uncertain, yeah, but mine all the same. That night, Stella and I hit the bar. It was loud and full, just like life should be. We tossed back drinks and threw our heads back with laughter that drew looks to new beginnings. Stella said, holding up her glass, "To tomorrow." "To tomorrow," I replied, and we drank to that, tomorrow and the day after, and all the days to follow. Because that's the thing about tomorrow. It's always on its way. And now, so was I, ready for whatever the hell it decided to bring. I'm Daisy, an 18-year-old in college from Florida. My parents split up when I was 12, and I've lived with my mom since then. Last year, my dad passed away from cancer. It was really tough because we were super close. He left me a lot of money, but I could only get it when I turned 18. This year, when I finally hit 18, something really surprising happened. One day, my stepdad Arlo, who's around 45 and has been married to my mom for 5 years, called me into his room. We haven't always gotten along, but I've tried to be nice to him. Still, he hasn't always been nice to me. He said, "Hey Daisy, we need to talk about something important." I asked what it was, and he mentioned the money my dad left me. He said I should give it to my stepbrother David because he needed it for college. David wanted to go to university like me, and Arlo thought I should give him the money. I was shocked. I couldn't believe Arlo was asking me to give away money that was meant for me. I told him, I don't think I can do that, Arlo. This money was a gift from my dad. What if I need it later? Arlo didn't agree. He said, don't be silly. You don't need that money. David needs it more. I stood my ground and said, I'm sorry, but the answer is no. Arlo got mad and warned me, Daisy, don't push me. I stayed calm and told him, there's no need to get angry. I'm being honest. Saying no isn't disrespectful. It's about setting boundaries. And if you're mad because I said no, you need to think about your attitude. Don't forget, you're a guest in this house too. So I decided to keep things civil and left before things could escalate. Arlo's behavior wasn't surprising, considering his past actions. I knew he'd eventually ask for the money. You might wonder where my mom was during this. Well, that's a different story. My mom seemed blind to Arlo's faults. She stood by him no matter what. It's like she was under a spell. She loved me, but I didn't want to ruin her view of him, so I tried to get along with Arlo for her sake. It's weird how, even though I was one of the youngest, I often had to act the most mature. My mom, Rose, was out of town, which is why she wasn't here. If she were, she'd have been furious. That's why Arlo felt he could boss me around. But little did he know, I was onto his sneaky plans. Arlo followed me out, scolding me and calling me a bad sister because I didn't want to give money to David, which wasn't true. I do want to help David stop being such a burden. When people say, like father, like son, they might be talking about David and Arlo. These two troublemakers are like Pinky and the brain. You can decide who's who based on what happened next. Hey, don't walk away while I'm talking. You need to listen and do what's right, Arlo, I said. Can you give me a good reason for that? Arlo asked. Well, it's what's going on with you two. Your arguing woke me up, David chimed in. Tell Daisy about what we talked about earlier, Arlo instructed David. What was it again? Oh, right, the inheritance money, David remembered. Yeah, Daisy, Dad and I were talking, and we demand this money because of that important thing we talked about. You mean the business, right? I asked. What business? David looked confused. You said this money was for my university tuition, I reminded him. Yeah, Daisy, that's because that's what it's for, right? David tried to cover up. Yes, I completely forgot. I just woke up, you know. Yes, it's for university. I have an interest in attending university, and I demand the money for myself. Thanks, David said hastily. Well, that's a cute attempt, but not cute enough. The answer is no, I asserted. Why not, Daisy? He knows what he wants. This wasn't up for discussion. We're getting that money, Arlo insisted. We'll see about that, I replied. The rest of the evening was tense. While Arlo was known for his silly pranks and attempts to test my patience, this new effort to annoy me was quite unusual. I'm a really immature and selfish person. This situation was pretty big, but I didn't want to tell my mom about it. But I wanted to keep dealing with them, especially after I found out. This, Daisy, stop playing around. You need to be a grown-up and do the right thing, Arlo said. Huh? And the right thing is giving away my money. Are you okay, Arlo? I questioned. Just wait until I tell Mom, I threatened. Don't tell Rose anything, Arlo commanded. Why not? She's my mom. She deserves to know how I'm being treated, I argued. You think she cares? Listen, I'm just trying to help you. If you bring this up to her, she'll get upset at you for wasting her time and being selfish, Arlo warned. Well, Arlo, that's a risk I'm willing to take. I'm warning you. Don't tell your mother, he said angrily. His tone surprised me. I had never seen him so worked up, especially over something like this. Something was going on, especially with that business idea David let slip. They think I'm not smart enough to catch on, and Arlo is acting strongly against me talking to my mom about it. I talked to my mom as soon as I could. Hey, Mom, how are you doing? I asked. I'm good, baby. How about you? She replied. Not very well, Mom. Something's off with Arlo and David, especially Arlo. He's acting weirder than usual, I confessed. Oh, Daisy, don't be paranoid. I know you don't really like him, but he's not weird, she reassured me. Mom, he asked me for the inheritance money, I revealed. What, really? Actually, he demanded to get the money, both him and David, I clarified. That's not true. He wouldn't do that. I know you love him, Mom, for whatever reason, but this is true. He said it's for David's education, but I think something fishy is going on. He even got pretty aggressive when I told him I'd tell you. What he said to me, I don't know, baby. I just feel like I need more proof, she hesitated. Don't worry, I'll get all the proof. Just wait and see, I promised. Even though my mom wasn't ready to fully believe me yet, I kept telling her that man put a spell on her. I was still determined to figure out this strange behavior. Late at night, I used the family computer and found something shocking. Luckily, it seemed Arlo forgot to log out of his email. That was a big mistake. I saw something very concerning. Arlo had been sending emails to a lady named Bella. These emails weren't nice at all. It looked like he was having an affair. I took notes on what I found, but the next thing I found was even crazier. The emails talked about Arlo divorcing my mom and running away with her. He said they'd get a lot of money soon for some business, but from what I read, it seemed like a shady business. Arlo isn't dumb enough to put illegal stuff in his emails, but he's dumb enough to have an affair and forget to log out. I knew I needed to gather more info, and I thought I could maybe get something out of David. So the next day, I talked to David with my phone recording our conversation. Hey, David. Hello, Daisy. You seem happy today. Why not? It's a beautiful day. I have some questions for you. I've been thinking about what you and Arlo said, and thinking about giving you the money. Really? That's great. I'll let him know. Not so fast. Before I give you this money, it is for your college, right? Oh yeah, right? My college tuition. Yes, right. Anyways, I need to be sure you're serious about getting this money. Yes, I'm very serious. Are you sure? And Bella, is she serious? Bella? Who's Bella? Oh, she's, a student advisor for the college. David and I were scared. We didn't know Arlo had come into the room. I don't appreciate you interrogating my son, Arlo said. I wasn't doing that. I was just asking how my money would be used, I defended. Well, once you give someone money, it's not yours anymore, so it's not your business. Is that any way to speak to someone who's thinking of giving you money? Arlo snapped. You're not thinking, you're giving me that money. If you don't, I'll kick you out, Arlo threatened. I was shocked, and it seemed like David was too. Dad, this wasn't part of. Shut up. I'm the parent, and I make the rules. If you don't give me that inheritance money, you can leave. I decided not to say anything. Little did Arlo know, I was still recording this conversation. I had caught him in the act. I walked out of the room, shooting Arlo an angry look, and locked myself in my room. I started collecting all the evidence I could find against him. It felt like those detectives on TV who gather clues and put them up on their walls. I had voice recordings and screenshots of Arlo's conversations with Bella. I prepared myself for the upcoming storm. After I had everything, I called my mom. Hello, Mom. Hey, love. How are you? Mom, are you sitting down? Why? What's wrong? I'm afraid I have some really bad news to share, and you won't like it. I began telling my mom everything I had discovered. She kept denying it until I made her listen to the audio recording I had made earlier. At that point, she started to crumble. Why would he say those things to you? Why would he do that to me? Why would he be so cruel? Because he's a bad man, I'm sorry to say it. But you married a monster. This is just terrible. I can't believe I left you alone with those two sickos. Absolutely not. I'm coming home right now. You stay where you are. Have you locked your door? Yes, ma'am. I'm going to ruin that man and make sure he never shows his face in public again. When I'm done with him, He'll wish he never married me. That's the spirit, Mom. Now, hurry up and get home. We need to make a plan. My mom arrived several hours later and came straight to my room. We hugged and cried for what felt like hours. I could tell that this news was tough to hear, but I was glad she was in the angry stage because it motivated her to take action. We talked for hours, and by the end, we had a plan. Several days passed, and Arlo couldn't figure out why my mom had come home early from her work trip and why she was ignoring him. He acted very happy, almost too happy, to convince her of his innocence. However, she saw through his act and was ready to kick him out. My mom decided to hire a private investigator after I showed her the suspicious messages about his supposed business. She also felt strongly that the money wasn't going to be used for legal purposes. This made her furious because she couldn't understand how a parent could be so cruel and scheming. She knew we couldn't handle this situation on our own. The private investigator shared the findings with my mom, who then told me I'm speechless. What did the investigator find? Well, it turns out he's planning to use a laundromat for money laundering. It's an old trick. Wow, that's not all, is it? No, it's not. This woman Bella, whom he's cheating on me with, has a criminal record for drug-related activities. She's been arrested multiple times for conspiracy to sell illegal substances. So it wouldn't be surprising if their business involves drugs too. That's unbelievable. I would have never expected this. I feel like a veil has been lifted from my eyes. Now I can see that the man I married isn't a man at all but a sick and twisted person. When are we going to confront him, Mom? Right now. Follow my lead. Wait, let me get my camera. We went to the living room and found David and Arlo discussing their shady business. And then we'll have to use this as a cover for our business. It's all going to be hidden. Just act like you don't know and serve the customers, okay? Oh, hey, everyone. We're just finalizing stuff for David's college application, Arlo said. Cut the act, Arlo. The game is up. We know everything, I interjected. What do you mean? Your innocent act won't work anymore. Smile for the camera, my mom added, holding up her phone. Get that out of my face, you spoiled brat. I mean Daisy. We know everything, Arlo. Do you know how many years you'd spend in jail for planning these crimes? I confronted him. I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe we should call Bella and see what she has to say, huh? Arlo deflected. You two think you know everything. Bella is just a friend, he continued. Well, the explicit photos suggest otherwise. Who even uses emails to cheat nowadays? It's so dumb. You two went through my things? How dare you? Arlo exclaimed. No, Arlo. How dare you? How dare you threaten my daughter multiple times to give you money that doesn't belong to you? How dare you threaten to kick her out of my house? Are you sick in the head? How dare you put your son in your foolish schemes, endangering him? And how dare you plan to use this money for illegal activities? Now you've got nothing to say, huh? We know everything, and we're going to take you down. My mom asserted. Get that camera out of my face. Arlo tried to lunge at me, but I moved too quickly. His aggressive behavior was scary. You want to attack my daughter? It's like you want to go to prison? You're crazy. Do you think you know anything? You know nothing, my mom shouted. Well, tell that to the police, who should be here any second now, I added. At that moment, we heard police sirens approaching our neighborhood. I had never seen Arlo look this way before. He was always smirking like he was smarter than everyone else, but when he heard those sirens, it was like all the color drained from his face. He looked terrified. Please, Rose, you don't have to do this. I could explain everything, Arlo pleaded. Save it for the judge, you cockroach. You disgust me and my David. Don't think you're off the hook for this. Both of you are getting arrested. That should teach you a lesson about mistreating my daughter and me. I know you're a kid, but you're old enough to know better, and for that, you need to be punished. My mom declared. Yes, Mom, David chimed in. Come on, Jasmine, don't you think all of this is a bit too much? Arlo tried to reason. On the contrary, it's not enough. My mom retorted. How's our live stream, Daisy? We've got over 3,000 people watching. This is going to be big. Oh, and in case it wasn't clear, I want a divorce. That's right, folks. Over 3,000 people witnessed the whole mess, and surely enough, the news made it to local newspapers and tabloids, I added. It was crazy to be in the middle of all this with my sick ex-stepfather and his son. But it was also satisfying to see his downfall. He lost his job, his friends, and even some family members who didn't want to speak with him anymore. He's facing charges for all these schemes, and if the judge sees fit, he could spend up to 20 years behind bars just for this. The police also found Bella, who had been in hiding when all of this was blowing up. She's facing the same charges. Life was good on our side, though. My mom and I grew closer due to this situation. On weekends, we'd often relax on the patio, drinks in hand, and laugh at how foolish and evil Arlo was. Good riddance indeed. After my brother got married and moved out, it's just been me and my mom living together. I've been feeling frustrated with her lately, but I'm grateful for how she raised me, so I can't just ignore her. I never thought she would treat me like this. Even though I've been helping her out with money, she still kicked me out of the house. It was all because of my brother and his wife. I'm really angry with them for what they did. I'm going to make them regret it. My name is Emily, and I'm 25 years old. My dad died a few years ago, and my brother Tom, who's 10 years older than me, left after getting married. So now it's just me and my mom. Honestly, I don't like living with her. Once I started working, she stopped her part-time job and just lounged around at home. Plus, she treats me like her maid, always asking me to do things for her. She'd say things like, "Emily, is dinner ready yet?" Or, "I need an extra $200 this month." It feels like the list of demands never ends. Some people might say I should just move out if I'm so unhappy. And I've thought about it many times. My mom's been my rock ever since my dad passed away. She raised me all on her own, while my brother Tom moved away after he got married. His wife, Catherine, doesn't want to live with Mom, so I can't rely on him much. As her daughter, I never even considered leaving her behind. But hey, I'm human too. Just because she's my real mom doesn't mean I have to put up with everything. Today, I got a bit upset and accidentally raised my voice at her. I noticed some money missing from my wallet and asked if she took it. She got defensive, saying she just borrowed it for clothes. But she never pays me back for the money she takes without asking. Every time I try to talk to her about it, she brings up how she raised me all by herself and how I owe everything to her. It's frustrating. I know she worked hard for me, and I appreciate it, but I'm not a kid anymore. I have a good job and enough money. Even if I gave her $2,000 every month, it wouldn't change my lifestyle much. I always felt like I couldn't let my mom have her way forever. Then, one day after work, I came home to find Tom and Catherine there. I hadn't seen them since Dad's funeral, and we hadn't kept in touch. Tom, being his usual insensitive self, started making snide remarks about me. I've always felt like he looked down on me and teased me, even when we were kids. "Why are you here, Tom?" I asked. "Why do I need a reason to visit my parents' house?" he replied. "But this apartment is mine. We had to sell our family home after Dad passed away, and I'm the one renting this place." Catherine, Tom's wife, joined in, making a comment about how uptight I am and how I'll never get married with that attitude. She said it without any remorse, just like Tom. I've never really liked either of them. After dinner, I escaped to my room. My mom, probably happy to see Tom after so long, chatted away with them smiling. It felt like they occasionally gossiped about me. Since that day, Tom and Catherine started coming over more often. And what really bothers me is that they act like this is their home. They're way too comfortable in my apartment. "Hey, Tom, what's going on? This is my place, you know." "What about it? What does my job have to do with you?" "I'm here because I'm worried about Mom and want to visit her often. You never bothered to reach out since Dad's funeral. It's none of your business. And speaking of business, I'm hungry. Cook something and do it quick." What's with this guy? Seriously, this is my place. Why are they lounging around like they own it? I want to eat a delicious cake. Emily, buy me one. And even my mom joins in. Buy it on your way back from work today, all right? So hurry up and go get it for us, you lazy girl. Catherine, who used to avoid my mom, suddenly seems to be getting along with her very well. As for Tom, he's projecting this I'm the eldest son vibe, and Catherine's playing along as the eldest son's wife, acting all concerned about mom. But I can tell they're up to something. I'm not sure what yet, but I'm certain it's not good. After a few days, their plan finally becomes clear. Emily, I've had it living with you. I've decided to end this. I was doing some chores on my day off when my mom suddenly said this. What do you mean by that exactly? I can't stand living with someone as slow, lazy, and unattractive as you anymore. What are you talking about? Don't you get it? I've made up my mind. I'm going to live with Tom and Catherine. You're going to live with Tom and Catherine? I was so shocked by this unexpected statement from my mom that I repeated what she said without realizing the implications. I couldn't believe what was happening. My brother, who always hated the idea of living with my mother, suddenly wants to live with her. What on earth is happening? Just then, Tom and Catherine conveniently arrived. Tom, what's going on? You never reached out to us before, and you always said you'd never live with mom, right? What's the problem? It's only natural for the eldest son to live with his own mother, isn't it? Tom said, looking down on me with a sense of superiority. That's not what I'm saying. But then it's fine for mom to live with us, right? I retorted. Are you serious? Even Catherine was against living together. Why the sudden change? You're so annoying. Anyway, mom's decided to live with us. We don't need you anymore. Just leave. Wait, leave? After all this time, when he left everything about mom up to me, I couldn't help but feel disgusted with my brother, who always spoke so arrogantly. However, it became clear that Tom and Catherine were up to something no good. Although my mother always had a sharp tongue, she's still my precious parent. Besides, I didn't want to get involved in any trouble later on, so I decided to confront my mother. Mom, isn't it obvious that something's going on? After all, Tom and his wife never once contacted us before. What are you talking about? If anyone's acting strange, it's you, isn't it? My mom replied. Huh, Mom, those who just leech off their parents should just leave, I said, feeling hurt. The moment she said that, any affection I had left for my mother vanished instantly. After all the support I've given and taking care of her, how dare she say something like that to her own daughter? I couldn't believe they were mocking me like this, especially after all the years I've supported them. Well, they'll regret it soon enough. After a week, they'll experience hell, so they'd better enjoy this moment. I started planning my revenge on them. But before I leave, I need to make one thing clear. I'm leaving. Now, I declared firmly to my brother, his wife, and my mother. The three of them began chatting, smirking at each other. Emily, you're finally leaving the house. Mom, you must be so happy, Tom said. I truly am. Now I can live with Tom and Catherine. I'm on top of the world. From now on, I'll be the one taking care of Mom, my mother replied. Thank you, Tom. I'm also happy that I can live with my beloved mother-in-law from now on. Oh, thank you too, Catherine, Tom's wife chimed in. To be honest, I struggled not to laugh at that moment. But I couldn't let them think I had any leeway to execute my revenge perfectly. It's best to lay low for now. From that day on, my brother and his wife seemed to be constantly in my apartment. As for me, it's as if I'm invisible to them, or rather, they treated me as if I never existed in the first place. However, this was advantageous for me because I wasn't bothered at all while preparing to move out. A week later, it was my moving day. Today is the day we part ways, Emily. We'll be taking care of Mom from now on, so you can live without any worries, Tom said casually. Thank you. I'm leaving Mom in your hands, okay? I replied. After saying this, Tom seemed somewhat unsatisfied with my response. Then my mother approached. I hope you get married soon, Emily. It'd be a shame to remain single for the rest of your life, wouldn't it? You know, the whole society would call a person like you a loser, my mother said. At her words, Tom and his wife snickered. I responded calmly, "That's true. From now on, I've decided to live just for myself. I mean, I no longer have to take care of you now, right? Just stop talking and get out. I never asked you to look after me. I was going to leave quickly anyway." "Oh, seems like they're here," I said, hearing the doorbell ring. I headed to the entrance. It was the movers from the moving company I had scheduled for today. After having them carry out all the belongings from my room, I pointed to the living room and told the movers, "Oh, and please move all the appliances and furniture in these rooms too." The dumbfounded voices of the three harmonized perfectly. They were completely confused at what was happening. That TV, the fridge, the microwave. Oh, and this cleaning robot too. Also, the sofa, dining table, and the bed. "Please move everything," I instructed. Then my mother began to argue. "What? What are you thinking? Stop this immediately." "What do you mean? Are you doing something strange? Don't play dumb. Taking all the appliances and furniture from this house? Have you lost your mind?" My brother, whose face was as red as a tomato, approached me aggressively. "Yo, listen to Mom. How do you expect us to live without any furniture or appliances? You have no right to take everything. Leave everything here and just go." My mother and brother were squawking in front of me. Thinking I shouldn't waste any more time, I clarified the situation to the two. "Hey, are you getting the wrong idea or something? Everything in this apartment, including the apartment itself and all of its appliances and furniture, are all mine. You know this is Mom's place, right? Don't mess with me. All the furniture and appliances were bought using the inheritance from Dad, weren't they?" I clarified. I knew it. He's just an idiot. As I had anticipated, he misunderstood and believed that my mother was financing everything in my apartment. He assumed that she had received a lot of inheritance from my father and had cleverly convinced them to live with her. "Tom, aren't you misunderstanding something? I bought everything in here. I've been giving Mom a monthly support of $2,000, you know. Thus, I've lost. You just want to live with Mom, don't you? Someday I'll inherit Dad's inheritance," I explained. "Huh? What are you talking about? Mom used up all of Dad's inheritance a long time ago," I added. Tom nervously glanced at our mother. She was looking down, her face pale. "Mom, please explain. You told us you bought all the appliances in here," Tom demanded. "Well, I was just trying to look good," my mother confessed. "Huh? What do you mean by that? We only moved in with you because we thought there was an inheritance from Dad. If there's no inheritance, what's the point of living together?" Tom exclaimed. "Wait, what are you saying? Didn't you say you take care of me because you're the eldest son?" Tom asked. "I was just trying to be nice. I lied so that we can live together," my mother admitted. Upon learning that there was no remaining inheritance, Tom was furious, and my mother was deeply shaken by the realization that the kindness shown by Tom and his wife was all fake. What a hopeless family, huh? My mother should have suspected something when Tom and his wife, who hadn't been in touch for a while, suddenly proposed living together, I thought to myself. As I gave the two cold looks, Tom's wife seemed to have an idea and spoke up. "I've got it. It would be great if Emily could live with us again." To this, my mother and Tom both agreed. "That's right, Emily. You should live with us after all," Tom insisted. "Yes, Emily, I really do need you," my mother added. Seeing the drastic change in their attitude as they began speaking for their own convenience, I quickly dismissed them right away. "What are you even saying? Don't make me laugh. There's no way I'd live with trashy people like you. I've decided to live only for myself from now on," I declared firmly. "Whatever happens to you all, I couldn't care less. But why don't you all just happily ruin your lives together?" I remarked coldly. The three of them, completely drained of energy, sat down on the spot as if their knees gave away. All three of them had empty eyes. "Goodbye. Do your best as a family," I said as I closed the front door. In just another 2 weeks, The lease for the apartment would end because it's under my name. They'll probably be forced out to leave when the lease is up. Well, it's none of my business anymore. About a week after I successfully moved, as expected, I received a call from my mother asking for help. "Emily, please. I can't live properly like this. Come back." "There's no way I'm coming back. Why don't you have that idiotic couple take care of you?" I retorted. "Actually, it seems they quit their work and moved here thinking I still had your father's inheritance," my mother confessed. "They really are terrible people, aren't they? I don't even feel like helping out at all. I don't need a couple who only thinks about money anymore. All I have is you, Emily," she pleaded. "Mom, I'm busy. Can I hang up now, please?" I said, cutting her off. "Emily, help me," she begged. I hung up the call before she could finish and blocked her number. I no longer felt the urge to help my mother, especially not now. Rumor has it that my mother and Tom's family got evicted from the apartment after that incident. They ended up spending all of Tom's savings to move into a shabby apartment. Apparently, my mother doesn't work, and she argues with Catherine almost every day. Tom is the only one who has a job, working from dawn till dusk just to make ends meet. As for me, after distancing myself from my mother, I've been able to save more money and use it for my own needs. After all these sacrifices I've made in the past, I want to lead a life that makes me happy from now on. My husband suddenly left me with a lot of money to pay back, and he's nowhere to be found. I tried calling him, but he's not responding. I don't know what to do because I can't afford to pay back such a big debt. Luckily, my daughter, Kate, cheered me up. I'm 35 years old, and I work part-time while taking care of the house. Kate's dad, Rogan, is missing, and we're a family of 3. I met Rogan at a party where I was feeling nervous, but he made me feel better by talking to me. We exchanged numbers and started dating. When I told my sister, Talia, about Rogan, she couldn't believe it because I'm usually quiet and don't go to parties. Talia was surprised that I found a boyfriend at a party and thought I'd date someone from work. When I showed her a picture of Rogan, she thought he was handsome. After catching up with Talia, we said goodbye for the day. Talia, who's still single, seems content with her relaxed life and isn't really looking for a boyfriend or marriage. While I understand her perspective, I'm focused on building a future with Rogan. I imagine us getting married and having children, which would be amazing. As I headed home, I couldn't help but smile. A few years later, Rogan and I did get married. I'll never forget the overwhelming emotions when he proposed and our move to a new apartment. Living together felt surreal at first, but we cherished every moment, whether it was sharing meals, snuggling under the same blanket, or enjoying our days off together. Eventually, we were blessed with a beautiful baby girl named Rhea. Her birth brought immense joy into our lives, and I left my job to fully embrace motherhood. Rogan was always supportive, helping with household chores and taking care of Rhea so I could rest. I'm grateful to have married such a wonderful person, and living with Rogan and Rhea has been a heartwarming experience. A few years later, I found myself deeply regretting marrying Rogan. After Rhea was born, Rogan suddenly quit his job without consulting me. He explained that he had been having problems with his new boss, which had taken a toll on his mental health. While I understood his reasons, I was upset that he hadn't discussed it with me first. Our family depended on his salary, and such a big decision should have been made together. Rogan's vague responses to my concerns didn't ease my worries, but I had to trust him. Thankfully, he found a new job quickly, which was a relief. I considered working too, but I wanted to be there for Rhea while she was still young. However, Rogan seemed different after starting his new job. He brushed off my questions about how things were going, assuring me that everything was fine. But his behavior made me uneasy. But I felt that pushing him further might upset him. So I handed Rhea to him and went to take a bath. A few days later, Rogan came home looking dejected. As I tried to ask him what had happened, memories of his previous sudden resignation flashed through my mind. Did he quit his job again so soon? Sadly, my suspicions seemed to be right. "I quit my job," he said. I just couldn't get along with the people there. I couldn't stand being constantly directed by someone much younger than me. I just couldn't bear it anymore. I see, I replied, trying to stay calm. But we'll get through this. We'll find another job. I'll help in any way I can. Suddenly, Rogan's expression changed, and he raised his voice at me. Hey, what's with that look? You don't like that I quit? You're able to eat because I work. You just stay at home and you're acting all high and mighty. With that, he threw his bag onto the living room table. I was stunned. Rogan had never spoken to me like this before. Unable to contain his anger, he grabbed a whiskey from the fridge and downed it in one gulp. I felt terrified. I've always been grateful to him and tried to be supportive as much as possible. But his sudden outburst created a rift in our relationship. Since then, Rogan has been in a cycle of finding and quitting jobs. We've lived in uncertainty, experiencing many anxious days. At first, I tried to understand his feelings and said nothing. Given the circumstances, I couldn't stay silent any longer. You're annoying, I told Rogan. If you have complaints, then you work and earn money. You rely too much on me. But there's Ria to consider, so what's your point? Lately, Rogan had been losing interest in Ria and seemed to be avoiding her. When Raya was born, he took great care of her and was genuinely happy. But observing him now, he felt like a completely different person. No matter how much I pleaded, Rogan showed no interest in continuing his work. Eventually, I decided to entrust Ria to Talia and started working on my own. I'm really sorry for having to leave her with you, I said to Talia. It's okay. Raya and I will wait together, she reassured me. Raya, who had just started attending kindergarten, wasn't a major concern when it came to leaving her with someone. Part of it was because I trusted Talia to take care of her. But Ria was also remarkably mature and calm for her age. She showed interest in newspapers, read them on her own, and could even write long and somewhat complex sentences. Raya had a quiet disposition and was exceptionally composed for her age. When she started kindergarten, I was concerned about whether she'd be able to make friends and communicate effectively with others besides me. However, it turned out I didn't need to worry. Raya made many friends in kindergarten and enjoyed her time there. As a parent, that was the most heartwarming thing to witness. Given the situation, I felt it would be no problem for me to work outside the home. When I started looking for a job, I found one quicker than expected. Thus, I began working full-time. The pay was better than I had anticipated, so even if Rogan quit his job, our finances would probably stabilize. Thankfully, the work environment was also pleasant, despite the busy days. I enjoyed working. A few years after I began working, Rogan finally found a stable job. It seemed like he might have finally found a workplace that satisfied him. Upon learning this, I felt a profound sense of relief. Over time, Rogan's demeanor started to brighten, and he seemed to return to the man I knew in the early days of our marriage. He became considerate of the challenges I faced juggling work and family, often asking, "Has it been tough? Aren't you tired?" I was a bit taken aback by this transformation. Perhaps job stability had given Rogan peace of mind. Ryan was growing up healthily, and Rogan started acting like a caring father to her once again. Seeing Raya play joyfully with Rogan always warmed my heart. Still, the thought of returning to the way things were before made me anxious about leaving my job. Therefore, I continued to rely on Talia for childcare. "How's Raya? Is she looking well?" I asked Talia one day. "Don't worry, she's playing happily," Talia reassured me. As long as Ria was doing well, I could be at ease. I'd probably continue to depend on Talia. I had been considering treating Talia to something she liked as a token of my appreciation. Several years went by, and Ria was now in the 3rd grade of elementary school. She attended school every day with great enthusiasm. The family's bond was just like before, harmonious and loving. I wondered what had caused the previous rift between Rogan and me. Our home life felt so stable, almost as if the past problems had been forgotten. Then one day, Rogan made a suggestion. Ever think about getting a new car? A new car. Yeah, our current one is good, but I think it's reaching the end of its life. If it's becoming a hassle to maintain, Rogan remarked. Indeed, the car we were using had been purchased quite a while ago, and over the years, issues increased, and the repair costs started to pile up. You might be right. Maybe we should consider a new car, I agreed. Yes, I knew you'd agree. By the way, I've already got some catalogs pulled ready, Rogan said eagerly. I didn't expect him to be this eager about replacing the car. I was a bit surprised, but we started looking through the catalogs together. Rhea, come here. Which car do you want to ride in? Let's decide together. Rogan called Rhea over, and the three of us enjoyed flipping through the car catalogs together. However, I couldn't have imagined that this day would mark the beginning of an unexpected turn of events. A few months later, the new car that the three of us chose was delivered. The car we bought was a brand new model costing over $155,000. The loan was under my name. Generally, people would expect Rogan's name on the loan, but considering his unstable work history, we were concerned about being rejected. I was determined to work even harder from now on and pay off the loan. I was sure Rogan felt the same way, that's what I believed. But my hopes were shattered in an instant. Rogan stopped coming home. He disappeared along with the newly purchased car. Could it be that Rogan got involved in some kind of trouble? What should I do? At that moment, my cell phone rang. The call was from Rogan. Hello, I answered, my voice filled with concern. Rogan, what are you doing? Where are you now? You disappeared all of a sudden, and the new car is gone. What happened? Did you get caught up in some trouble? I tried to convey how I had worried every day until then, but Rogan laughed at my concerns and said something unbelievable. Actually, I found a new lover. She's more important to me than you, he said bluntly, leaving me stunned and devastated. I've fallen in love with someone else. I've already taken care of the divorce notice. I'd appreciate it if you stopped getting involved. Rogan's voice echoed in my ears. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The mention of a divorce notice shocked me to my core. However, a memory of a discussion we had during a big fight resurfaced. Submitting the application to the court meant that both parties agreed to the divorce. I deeply regretted letting my emotions take control at that time. Oh, by the way, I have a debt. I'm counting on you to repay it, Rogan added casually. What? How much debt are we talking about? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. I think $200,000, give or take. I'm leaving all the repayments to you, Rogan replied before abruptly hanging up the phone. I never thought something like this would happen to me. Were all of his kind smiles in the past just lies? As these thoughts crossed my mind, I could feel the strength drain from my body. Mom, what happened? Raya rushed over, looking concerned. It's okay, honey. Thank you. I tried to put on a brave face, but inside, I was filled with anxiety. How will I manage our life now with such a massive debt looming over us? The thought of the $200,000 made me feel suffocated. On top of that, there was still the car loan to think about. In a state of panic, I checked my bank balance. I searched the closet, drawers, kitchen, bedroom, everywhere. But my ATM card was nowhere to be found. Frantically, I launched my bank app on my smartphone. To my horror, the account balance had significantly decreased. Of course, I had no memory of withdrawing such an amount. Rogan was the only suspect. I tried to contact him, but of course, there was no response. With my mind going blank, I decided to focus on earning money. I kept this a secret from Talia to avoid unnecessary worry, and I also kept it from young Rhea. A few weeks after Rogan disappeared, I lost consciousness at work. When I came to, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. Where am I? I asked, feeling disoriented. Kate, are you awake? Talia entered the room with a shaken expression, Raya standing beside her. It seemed I had fainted due to extreme stress. I was told that I needed to be hospitalized for several days for detailed examinations. Hospitalized. What should I do? I wondered aloud. After you're discharged, Let's talk about Rogan, Raya said suddenly. I was surprised to find out that Raya knew the truth. When it was time for my discharge, I felt a bit down, fearing Talia might point out that I wasn't supposed to let her know about it. Then, the next day, various tests were conducted. The results revealed that my poor health was due to cancer. Fortunately, it was still in the early stages, and there was hope for recovery through surgery. Although the surgery went well, returning to work immediately seemed impossible. I had no savings and medical bills were piling up. During these challenging times, Talia and Ria became my pillars of support. When Raya explained the situation with Rogan and my current state to Talia, she was even more furious than I had anticipated. Talia tried to locate Rogan with a plan to make him repay the debt and medical bills, but his whereabouts remained unknown. We don't have any leads on Rogan's current location. What do we do? I asked in frustration. It was then that Talia came up with a suggestion. The car that's under your name. Rogan has it, right? How about we try to get it back? Is that really possible? I asked in surprise. Talia shared more information. Actually, I found out where Rogan is currently working. Surprisingly, he seems to be working for a different company inside the building where I work. Though I usually opt for remote work, I occasionally visit the office and have reportedly seen him there. Knowing this, we can move forward with our plan. Let's go to Rogan's place right away, I said eagerly, wanting to confront him immediately. But Talia stopped me. Don't rush. We need a solid plan, not just a hasty approach. That's right, a plan, Raya chimed in. Both of them exchanged smiles, and I couldn't grasp the profound implications behind their demeanor. Watching them silently, Ria beamed and reassured me, saying, "Don't worry, everything's set up." What kind of scheme had they hatched? They didn't provide the specifics, but everything became clear a month later. While at Talia's house, there was a sudden incoming call. Checking the caller ID, it was from Rogan. Initially, I ignored the call, but it kept coming in repeatedly. Something must have happened. Gathering my courage, I answered, and Rogan pleaded in a frantic voice. "Hey, help me out, please. I'll explain everything later. Just get here now. I'm about to be arrested." Rogan shared his current location and quickly ended the call. Having overheard the conversation, Talia and Raya finally revealed the turn of events. Actually, we reported the car as stolen, and the idea was Raya's. Impressive, right? Raya blushed and looked down, filled with gratitude. I expressed my heartfelt appreciation for their ingenuity and determination. I expressed my heartfelt thanks to Talia and Ria for their incredible support and hurried to the place where Rogan was waiting. The park he specified was surprisingly close to my home. There were police officers gathered around Rogan, and he seemed to be interrogated about something. We hurriedly approached Rogan's vicinity. First, we explained the situation to the police officers and had them leave. Afterward, Rogan ushered us into his car and began narrating the events that led to this. Glancing inside the car, I noticed a confident-looking woman sitting boldly in the passenger seat, her legs crossed. She stared at us with a cold gaze. "Thanks for coming. But why did the police come to me?" Rogan asked, puzzled. He had been surrounded and questioned by the police, yet he didn't seem to have heard anything they said. I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't find words, because I reported the car as stolen. After all, that car is mine, I finally managed to say. "What? We're divorced, so we have no current ties." Thus, the current situation paints a picture of Rogan as unauthorized, using another person's car. Reporting it stolen was the natural course of action, Talia explained. Raya furthered the conversation with Rogan, who was visibly shaken. "Dad, why did you leave us behind? Why won't you pay back the money yourself? Explain." Rogan let out a sigh and looked at us with an exasperated expression, but he remained silent. "If you're just going to remain silent, I'll report it to the police. Do you realize that using my name without permission is a crime?" I warned. Hearing this, Rogan began to talk bit by bit. He mentioned his mistress, Lily, Apparently, she recently joined the company where Rogan works, and they connected during a company event. Concerns about the timeline of Lily's pregnancy, pointing out an inconsistency. Your belly's pretty big. Is it a baby? When are you due? Raya asked. In about 3 months, I guess, Lily replied. However, this calculation didn't seem right. Considering she was supposedly impregnated 3 months ago, shouldn't there be more time? Talia also noticed this inconsistency and pressed Lily further. Is that baby really Rogan's? Isn't it odd for the baby to be due in 3 months? Whose child is it? Talia voiced her concerns. Lily's expression faltered for a moment before she composed herself and responded. Of course, it's Rogan's. There's no doubt about it. But Talia wasn't convinced. Are you sure about that? The timing doesn't add up. Rogan remained silent, seemingly lost in thought. The atmosphere grew tense as everyone waited for an explanation. Lily's demeanor shifted, and she exchanged a nervous glance with Rogan before replying. Well, there might have been some miscalculation, but I'm sure the baby is Rogan's. Talia continued to scrutinize Lily's response, sensing something was amiss. As the pieces of the puzzle started to come together, it became clear that there was more to the story than meets the eye. Talia decided to address Lily's revelations directly. Surprisingly, Lily didn't seem intent on hiding anything. Actually, the child isn't Rogan's. I thought about keeping it a secret, but I figured it'd be a hassle to get further involved with him, so I'll just spill the beans, Lily admitted. Is that why you were honest about the debt too? I asked. Yeah, there's no point being with Rogan anymore after all, Lily said with a mocking expression. The atmosphere grew heavy and tense. I felt the urge to get away from there immediately. Meanwhile, Rogan stared intently at Lily with an incredulous expression. Hey, what are you talking about? This is a joke, right? Why would it be a joke? Rogan demanded. I mean exactly what I said, Lily replied firmly. The tension increased, making the atmosphere even more stifling. Amidst this, Talia took charge of the situation. Anyway, I'll call the police, Talia announced. Huh? What are you talking about? Rogan protested. I couldn't care less about you two. But remember, borrowing money under Kate's name is a criminal act. Plus, using the car without permission is also a crime, especially since Rogan and Kate are complete strangers, Talia explained. She instructed me to contact the police. Rogan and Lily were frantically trying to talk their way out of the situation. However, I ignored their pleas and made the call. After a while, I could hear the sirens approaching. This should make them face the consequences, I thought, feeling a huge sense of relief. Finally, things were getting sorted out. In the end, Rogan and Lily faced legal action. They didn't end up in prison, but they had to shoulder responsibilities such as compensation payments, repaying the debt, and child support. On several occasions, they tried to reduce the payments through lawyers, but justice prevailed. A secret recording that Raya had made was used as evidence, leading to the denial of Rogan and Lily's requests. Raya had been inspired to make the recording after watching a scene from a TV show with Talia. I marveled at Raya's quick-wittedness and couldn't help but wonder about the kind of shows Talia had exposed her to. Now Rhea and I live with Talia, and Rhea doesn't face any issues commuting to school since the distance from our previous residence was quite close. The car was safely returned, and it seems Rogan is somehow managing the debt. If Rogan hadn't made those wrong decisions in the first place, he wouldn't have had to face such hardships. Throughout this whole incident, the presence of Talia and Rio was significant, and thanks to them, the situation is heading towards resolution. I'm determined to work hard from now on, hoping for a peaceful life with the two of them.